Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I had a computer hiccup like literally just before the show started. That's actually a good thing that it happened before the show started. Otherwise, it would create more difficulties when the show kept going. I hope you guys are doing all right. This is a fantastic day. Fantastic day. Things are going well. There's a question that is looming that I don't think we're questioning at all. The United States will most likely get involved into the military conflict. There are a few points that I want to make before my guests join. We have a fantastic show for you today also. On big news, I've broken 60,000. Thank all of you for that. That is deeply appreciated. But let's start. Let's go here first. Israel is still committing massacres. We always have to start there first because we need to set context before we go into anything else. I would like to show you the reason for my, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, as we watch some of these videos. I can't show a lot of this. This is, and I would say trigger warning on that one first. Here's another list of people who are being forced marched. There's that. There's that. As things continue militarily, you have Iran, who has remained resilient despite the fact of threats and everything else coming out of the United States. I think I said before, they're not really going to care about anything coming out of those threats from Donald Trump. This. That is some good coffee. Let's keep going. There is more. Here's another one. God's justice. And there's more. Let's keep going. This is apparently headquarters. God. Smoke. Now, on the headquarters of Mossad being up in smoke, they are saying that there were several military or let's say agents that were here as it burned. So, there's that. That is good coffee. Good coffee. Let's keep going. Somebody said early morning riddle battles. Yes, I may get into that later, but it's irrelevant to anything I'm doing. He doesn't matter. This one is interesting. Look at this. All these are air defense. I think there's like 12 of them. They go up in the sky. It's like, what are they shooting at? But then you see something scream into the picture. You can hear it. Where is it? 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 I saw it the first time I looked at this thing. Where is it? There it is. There it is. There it is. Thor's justice. Bam. And you can see a flash at the end. All of those air defense couldn't touch it. And if you want to see the damage to that, I think it was something that looked like this. For the damage. Everything in smoke, everything fire, looks a lot like Gaza. People walking through rubble. Things on fire. Buildings destroyed. Oh, you can't see that. Hold on. I'm sorry. Let me flip that over. This one. By the way, they don't supposed to be taking these pictures. That's illegal. Yep. Rubble, destroyed buildings, fires. Yep. And before you feel too bad, just remember, those are the same people that was okay with this. That was okay with it. And the first video that I showed that I'm probably going to have to delete from this video, they murdered 50, 60 people today alone that were trying to get food. These bags, they shot those people, murdered many of these people. What you saw was people at a hospital. I can show you other videos. There's multiple videos of people in that situation. But I'm pointing out that these people are being victimized by these people. So save your sympathies. Let's keep going. Here is more air defense, or at the very least, lack thereof. Oh, they're running. They're running. Or are they dancing? Well, at least air defense did work at that one on some level. But then you have videos like this where air defense didn't work at all. Look at what happens with this air defense. It goes up and then it curls back in on itself. It's like even the air defense comes back and it's fight for the Israelis. And just to make sure you guys saw this clip, because sometimes I screw up with the clips. Yep, that's what happens. That is what happens. Here is Haifa, one of the major oil ports, on fire in the daytime.
סרטון מאירוע השרפה בדרך בר יהודה בחיפה. כוחות כיבוי מכל המחוז עובדים פה במספר שעות. מתחם האנגר שנשרף.
And of course, because Haifa is on fire, you have situations like this with Israelis effectively not handling this all that well and fighting each other for gas wars. Those guys are fist fighting. And that guy's holding the gas tank. He's like, shit, man, I need gas. I just need gas. I just want gas, man. I just want gas. It's like, we were here for the murdering of Palestinians, but shit, man, I didn't know you were going to affect my gas. Now, the catch becomes, is what happens, or with those people, when they, at some point, as I said about Ukraine, they will ask, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And I really hope they place the blame where it belongs. A, we were a client of the United States, just like Ukraine, just like Taiwan. B, we were led by a man who came out and claimed that Iran was trying to get a nuclear bomb for God knows how long. And we operated with complete and unlimited impunity in the murder and slaughter of the population that we are occupying in one sense and keeping in a cage in another sense. This is Netanyahu. There are some analysts, quote unquote, that will try to tell you, or at the very least try to now tell you, evolve in their position. The same people who said that the Ukraine war was going to be over with in a few months. Those people who tried to act as if this was all about Iran getting a bomb and trying to blame Iran for it, they've evolved now. They've evolved. But just be aware, this lunatic, entirely backed by the US client, for the last 30, 40 years, has been saying this.
The deadline for attaining this goal is getting extremely close. And Iran, by the way, is also outpacing Iraq in the development of ballistic missile systems that they hope will reach the eastern seaboard of the United States within 15 years. By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb. The foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. That would place a militant Islamic terror regime weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
You know, personally, I think you should have kept the comic book bomb on the side. That's my favorite. The huge thing, like the Elmer Fudd bomb, he's like a bomb that can blow up in the short term. That's my favorite. My point is, despite what many people will be telling you that this is about quote unquote nukes, and despite all of these fake negotiations that I've been telling you are fake negotiations for the last, 3 or 4 months at this point, ever since Donald Trump has been in office, it has never been about nukes. It is not about nukes now. There's another part to this that needs to be understood. And just to, again, nail this point home that's that much more clearly, right here, the IAEA, Grossi, the one who Iran has papers on that was pretty clear, was working with the Israelis, comes out and says this. But even though he is corrupt, he even comes out and says this.
I mean, there is this competition about who is wrong or right about the time that would be needed. Certainly, it was not for tomorrow. Maybe not a matter of years. I would there be perhaps more serious about this, and I don't think it was a matter of years. But this is speculation. Why? I go again to the beginning of my comment.
So the guy who is supposed to be in the know is pointing out, hey, this is not days. This is not even years. I mean, I know this is my job, but I don't really know. But, you know, it's not in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, in the way that the Israelis have been saying for the last 40 years. That's interesting, right? You get Tulsi Gabbard, DNI chief, that Donald Trump hired, by the way, who came out and effectively said Iran is not trying to produce a nuke. Donald Trump asked about this, came out and said this.
I think they were very close to having. But how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon. I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having one.
I don't care what the person I hired said. I don't care what the person that I hired to do this job said. I think me, Donald Trump, and my infinite knowledge of nothing, believe that they were on the way to getting a nuke. This was never about nukes. The very fact that every time we were in negotiations, Donald Trump escalated the demands, wouldn't even write anything down. I think they only wrote something down once in regards to what they wanted. And he was all over the place in regards to having a conversation. Initially, it was about the amount of enrichment. Then it became no enrichment at all. Then eventually it became, well, we don't like you dealing with state sponsors of the resistance in the region, meaning it was never a serious negotiation. The entire point of this was always within the context of the other regime change wars that the United States has fought or used Israel as a proxy for in the region. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Sudan is a basket case, with the last man standing being Iran, and you have a bunch of whack jobs and Zionists that are surrounding the Trump administration that he hired. And you don't believe that they're looking at this as, this is our chance. We can kill all the Gazans. We can evict them out of the area. We can take the West Bank. We've taken down Syria. We've been able to have a genocide in front of the world without the world doing anything about it. And now we're looking at Iran. And one last point before I get to my guest. I am unclear on whether or not Israel believed that they were going to be able to win this war. And the fact of the matter is they were reloaded everything just before they did this attack. The U.S. was intimately involved in this attack. They wouldn't have done this without the United States' permission, green light, or for that matter, even push. I don't think you need to push with Netanyahu, but fair enough. they knew that they were going to get into trouble. They knew that if the first phase of the attack wasn't going to work, which it wasn't going to work, that they were going to come screaming to the U.S., and the U.S. was most likely going to assist, which is what the United States will do. Right here. This is reporting that has come out that Israel is running out of missiles, running out of air defense. Now, Iran has said, we can do this all year. We're just warming up. And you've only taken out our 10-year-old stockpile or whatever. And so now the U.S. has to get involved in order to save its client, something that I suspect was planned already in the beginning. We initiate a war. We want to regime change that country. We're going to use Israel as a proxy. And yes, that does mean that Israel got his people killed in order to do this. And now the U.S. will get involved to come saving its client. I would make a wager to you, we're going to lose this. An empire, in the process of losing this, is going to be diminished significantly. I want to bring in my guests. We're joined with the man himself, Dr. Wilmer Leon. I like to call him doctor because, damn it, he earned it. Dr. Wilmer Leon, he's radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, and host of Connecting the Dots. How you doing, my man? You doing okay today?
Yes, I am, and thank you for that introduction. I'm also a guy that needs a haircut, which is why I have the hat on.
You're perfectly fine. You see, I got rid of my homeless beard. Once I finally left country, I was like, all right, I can't look homeless.
Right.
You heard part of that monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have kept going with that monologue because there are other parts to this that are fascinatingly important.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question that often looms about whether Trump is complicit or whether Donald Trump is just incompetent. And I think you made the point before, both of those things are probably true together. It's not one or the other, it's both. Larry Johnson was given an interview, and Larry Johnson came out and said something that is fascinating to me, because this gets to the stupid part. Yeah, complicit. I mean, obviously, he seems to be okay with the whole regime change thing, quote unquote. But, you know, when Trump says, I don't like losers, he may be serious. He doesn't like losers, even though he lost in Yemen, even though he's getting beat in Ukraine. He thinks that this may be one of his wins. This is what Larry Johnson said, that effectively Trump is being lied to, and he's too stupid to realize it.
We don't have good intelligence, and we certainly don't have ground penetrating radar that tells us how many missiles they've got stacked up in these tunnels and buried in these mountains. But I guarantee you that in addition to storing such missiles, they're also doing production of such missiles in these secure locations. So we don't have even a clue exactly how many they have. However, the Trump is being advised, I've learned within the last hour before coming on air with you, that Iran is it's run out of missiles.
Now, Dr. Leon, you and I have worked at the same radio station, and we remember those headlines. Russia's running out of missiles. Putin is about to commit suicide. Putin has 5th stage cancer. Putin has, add whatever else into it. He's isolated.
Don't forget the diaper. Don't forget he was walking around. He was part of Funkadelic. He was walking around in a diaper looking for the mothership.
That's my point, right? Like, these headlines come out all the time. Mm-hmm. And, if you work on a radio station like we did, you realize, okay, these people are they're out of their minds. They're just making this stuff up for public consumption. Do you think that he is that stupid where they tell him stuff and he just runs with it? Even though from his point of view, or from the point of view of MAGA, that the first time around that Donald Trump was effectively being misled by the people around him. Well, it sounds like that may be true once again, which, just be clear though, it's his responsibility. So I'm not taking responsibility away from him. Mm-hmm. Whether he thought he can win or lose is irrelevant to the point. He's provoking a war and is getting involved in a war. I'm just trying to say though that he may be given data that he thinks is true. He thinks this is going to be a slam dunk, and it's not. Give me your thoughts.
There are a couple of things here. One is, I believe in the first administration, he had a lot of sycophants, but then there were also some rational thinking people walking around bumping into him every now and then saying, hold on there, partner, you know. And so there was a bit of, I'm not going to call it balance, I'll call it offset.
Mm-hmm.
There was some offset to the foolishness, which I believe kept him going totally off the rails. I think he learned from that, and now now they're not there.
Yeah.
So what he has surrounding him are a bunch of sycophants that are telling him exactly what he wants to hear in a manner in which he wants to hear it. Yes, they're lying to him, but when you're dealing with a transactional individual who, first of all, whose moral compass is his true north is the transaction. It's not based on morality. It's not really based on any type of fact. And if we talk about it in a geopolitical context, it's not based on any real clear worldview. Then you can wind up with this totally erratic, off-based gibberish that they call policy. But to your initial question about did he know or didn't he know, I don't think that matters. And the reason I don't think that matters is because we're talking about American foreign policy irregardless of who's in the White House. The policy that Donald Trump is pursuing is the same policy Joe Biden pursued.
Yep.
Which is the same policy to a certain degree that Barack Obama pursued. Now, some will say, well, wait a minute, Wilmer, President Obama gave us the JCPOA. Well, that's true, but you have to understand that when you talk to those who really, like Jamarl Thomas, who really understand the JCPOA, they will tell you the United States never intended for that agreement to be fully executed. It was a stopgap, and it was not a treaty. It was merely an agreement between not the United States and Iran, but between President Obama and I'm not sure the Iranian constitutional process. But I'll just say it was not a treaty that was approved by Congress.
Right.
So whether or not Donald, and now I'm speaking to the initial invasion by Iran, the initial attack by Iran last week, there was all this scuttlebutt about did Donald Trump know or didn't he know? It doesn't matter.
I mean, come on.
Because the United States and Iran are operating in concert.
You mean Israel?
Israel. Thank you. The United States and Israel are operating in concert against Iran. So
Yes.
whether or not Netanyahu called Trump on Monday and said, hey, Donald, tomorrow I'm pushing the button, it's a go, that is irrelevant because they're operating towards the same end. Their objectives, their goals, their methodologies are the same. So what was there this great cabal sitting around a table? It doesn't matter, because when you're operating in concert, you know what your cohorts or counterparts are willing to do and not willing to do, and you can operate within that framework.
Dr. Leon, I love you to death, but it does matter. It's not a minor point. And the reason why I say it's not a minor point is because they were obviously working in tandem. Mm-hmm. Like the notion to me, and let me break it into 2 points. The reason that it matters is because you get a lot of MAGA who are disillusioned, who are confused. And like Steve Bannon's like, whoa, I mean, I can't believe this is happening. Like, he just seems bewildered by the whole thing. Like, when you got the attack on the Russian nuclear fleet, and I'm like, he obviously knew. He's lying. He was using a shadow campaign in order to try to push the Russians into a deal that they weren't going to take. He's just stupid. So he didn't realize that Putin wasn't going to accept it. And Steve Bannon is like, whoa, he should walk if he doesn't back this. And it's like, why are you, like, you're a political strategist. Why are you bewildered? And I guess I'm saying the same thing is true for this. The notion that it's somebody who we give 80% of their armaments, missiles, bullets, guns, all of that stuff to, that we refilled their jets in order to fill them up to the hilt before this took place, filled them up with air defense and everything else, that argued weeks before this took place to the ICJ that they could starve people, 2 million people, and that we were blissfully unaware. It's mind-blowing if that's the case, right? But you have many people in MAGA who still want to go with this idea that, but Donald Trump is a man of peace. Do you know that Don Jr. was on Twitter is like, the neocons want to divide us. That's why you should support my dad. Support your dad for a neoconish war? Is that what you're saying? Like, so I guess my point is it does matter, even though I know your point. Like, this is U.S. policy, regardless, either way you look at it. Both are dovetailing. Both of them agree. I'm just trying to take aim that Donald Trump is not an infant that many of these people think that he is. He's a child with a gun.
Okay. Well, see, I think we're both right. I mean, what you're saying, I don't believe negates my point.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
You're right. Donald Trump owns this. He is the president of the United States. He is the commander in chief. You are absolutely right. He owns this. The squabble within MAGA is, to me, similar to the squabble within the DNC.
Yeah,
it is a clear demonstration of the reality that the country is not nearly as far right as most conservatives want to believe it is, and it is not nearly as far left as most liberals or Democrats want to believe it is. And now that these realities are manifesting themselves, and I mean, when you go to a Chuck Grassley town hall in Iowa,
yes,
and you have the optics that you have when you have people in Iowa, white people in Iowa, asking Chuck Grassley, what are you doing with Mr. Garcia? Where is Mr. Garcia? That, to me, because the media, to a great degree, has put this in a racialized context. That's why I make reference to the fact that these are white people in Iowa making this demand. You're not expecting them to be focused on that. That, to me, speaks volumes. That tells you that the country, when you look at the reaction when you look at the No Kings protest across the country, and not only the volume of people, but the vast, diverse spaces in which this, you go from cities as large as Los Angeles to me is still a town. I'm from California, a little town, Fresno, California, not the burgeoning metropolis of Fresno. I mean, it's to little hamlets in New Hampshire. Folks, the country is not happy, and unfortunately, neither side of the aisle is listening to the country. Can I make one more point?
Please.
Because, folks, I think some of the evidence in terms of this is not Donald Trump policy, when you listen to the mainstream media, and I'll just say in the West, CNN and MSNBC, and you read the Wall Street Journal and Washington Post, they're all touting the same lie. That if Donald Trump if the United States / Israel does not intervene Iran will have a bomb within the next day, week, month. The timeline varies, but they're all telling the same lie. Now, the Wall Street Journal, as you so rightly posted, they're saying that Tulsi Gabbard testified in March. The intelligence estimate says no.
Yep.
They will tell you that. But the larger point they're making is we've got to make this move. And that, to me, tells you the complicity of the media, which then signals to me this has a hell of a lot less to do with whatever administration is in place. And also, what you'll find is, because I was watching MSNBC yesterday, and I can't remember which show it was, but they asked, how did this happen in Iran? And their starting point of history was 1979 and the Iranian Revolution, as opposed to 1953 and the U.S. overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran.
Yep.
They never talked about why there was an Iranian Revolution. They never talked about the Shah was the U.S. dictator reinstalled in Iran. They never talked about the Savak, the
intelligence service,
the Shah's brutal, torturous intelligence service. The very same way that if you ask them about the current conflict in Gaza, all history begins on October 7th. They ignore the previous 70 years.
Ain't it funny how that works? Ain't it funny how that works? You control history, so you can just control the future going forward.
Exactly.
Those sexy Iranian women in mini skirts. I remember having a conversation with a guy, and he's like, "Oh man, they're just these religious wars that go back forever." And it's like, dude, you understood we overthrew the government, right? They weren't always like religious in the way, like meaning you said people in miniskirts in Afghanistan. I'm using miniskirts as a demarcation point from the religious tradition that is now coming to play since they've overthrown their government, and the U.S. has never necessarily gotten wind of it or gotten over it. If you my rule, if you leave countries to their devices, they will evolve and grow, and they will inevitably grow towards some level of freedom and liberation for the citizens of the country, because people don't necessarily like to be held under thumb. If you put pressure on them, they will be different. They will be different.
Well, two things to that point, because I've been to Iran twice. And
have you?
Yeah, I was there in 2016, and then they brought me back I was there for 10 days in 2016, and I lectured at universities all over the country.
Go ahead.
And then, I thought you knew that. And then, and then they brought me back to celebrate the revolution in February of 17. And as you're walking through the streets, you're amazed at how Western culture, to your point about leave people to their devices, man, they love the West.
Yeah.
The thing that shocked me was I'm sitting in the hotel where we spent in the lobby of the hotel where we spent just about all of our downtime, and you see all these women walking around with surgical tape on their faces, and so
really?
So I started counting, and then my mathematical abilities failed me because there were so many women. And so I'm asking my interpreter, I said, "Man, what's up with this?" And he says, "Oh, Iran is the plastic surgery capital of the Middle East. And these women are here getting their eyes done and getting their noses done." I said, "Why?" Because they read Western glamour magazines and they want to look more westernized.
Soft power.
I'm walking around the one of the bazaars, one of the main bazaars in Tehran, and this guy, one of the vendors, hears me speaking, and he starts yelling, "America, America, I want to go to America. Take me with you to America." I mean, he's yelling this, and he comes from behind out his stall, and he meets me in the aisle, and he just starts saying, "America, America, I want to go to America." And I said, "Man, why in the hell would you want to do that?" And he says, "The beaches and the women are beautiful." So I'm now later doing an interview on Press TV, and they asked me what I thought about my trip. And I said, "Man, your country is beautiful. Your food is phenomenal." And I said, "But you all don't have to worry about General Schwarzkopf. You got to worry about Colonel Sanders."
Fifth column.
And the guy, I said, "Because as I look at how Western influence or Western culture is creeping into your culture," I said, "Man, when that 2-piece and a biscuit hits your shores, you guys are done." I said, "Because you're going to start dealing with hypertension. You're going to start dealing with obesity. You're going to start." I said, "Man, it's going to be that sodium and those artificial ingredients. They're going to wipe you guys off the map. It ain't going to be General Schwarzkopf. It's going to be Colonel Sanders."
Soft power is a real thing. Like culture is a soft power. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember I was in Egypt, and when the guy realized I was an American, in very brutal English, like could barely get it out, he was like, "Oh, I want to go to America." Yeah. And he points out, he says, "I want to have sex with women." Now, for my thing, the religion is always an overlay. That's not really who it is to be a person. That's just an overlay. That's kind of like a software. And he was like, I want to go and hook up with these women. And as I pointed out to him, I was like, that's not like random, right? Like there's more work to that than I think you realize. And there was another guy where it was like these other women came, and they were from states. They were beach white, like just bleach white. He was like, "Oh my God, they're so sexy. They're so white. Their skin is so white." No, you're right. The cultural thing is real. Like the cultural thing is real. It's fascinating, like the way that works.
And final point to that, yeah. My interpreter who spoke and speaks, because I still communicate with him, great English. He's an English teacher. He says, "Dr. Leon, can you do me a favor?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Can you talk black?" I said, "Man, what are you talking about?" And there were about 5 African Americans. We were sitting at dinner, and they were ready to kick his natural bone ass when he said that.
He didn't mean that as an insult, though.
No. He said, no, I said, "Ali, am I talking?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Am I black?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Then I'm talking black." He said, "Oh, no." He said, no. As they talk on the wire.
Right.
I said, I'm gonna do you a favor. He said, "What is that?" I said, "I'm gonna save you from the ass whooping that these folks at this table want to subject you to, and let me have you understand that's not real." I said, it's not real in the context in which he learned a lot of his English from watching television, and The Wire is one of their favorite shows, and at least it was when I was there, in Iran.
Yeah.
And I said, "Man, that's not real. Not in the broader context." But
they don't know it though.
But to his credit, his point, and he made this very clear, was as an interpreter, not only do I have to learn the language, I have to learn the nuance. I have to learn the slang. I have to understand context. So he says, "You speak very clearly. You speak perfect English." Mm-hmm. He said, "But as an interpreter, I'm not always going to be engaging with people like you. So I need to understand. So we started joking around with him and, the DC slang and all that kind of stuff. But I just found that to be an interesting side point.
I will tell you another side note on that before I go to the other one. I was in Israel. I was first time out of the country, going through just country after country after country. I go through Egypt, overland in Israel as I'm going to Jordan. And I had been there a few days. I'm going to a popcorn stall, and I ordered like popcorn, something to drink. And when the guy realizes American, he gets very excited, Israeli, very excited. And he was like, "Oh my God," he says, "Niggas, we love niggas here." And I'm like, my mouth hit the floor. I'm sitting, I'm like, because there's no context for that, right? Like it's just kind of like, what the F just happened?
Right.
But he is legitimately excited. He doesn't realize, hey, that is frowned upon. He doesn't get that. What he gets is,
putting it mildly.
Yeah, he gets, I listen to rap music. I think rap music is great. I listen to American movies or watch American movies. This is stuff that they say in the movies. So I don't really entirely have a context for what I'm saying here. I just know I'm excited to meet somebody who's Black, maybe for the first time ever. And this is the way he explains it. And I'm trying to I realize, okay, he's not meaning this negatively.
Right.
And as I'm trying to point out to him, say, that's kind of frowned upon. That's not real life. Like I know that's the soft power push that comes out.
And you've become, in that instance, you've become one voice against the dominant culture.
Yes, it's weird. It is very weird. But that's the stuff that comes out. It's so wild.
And if I could ask, because I know BB watches this show, if I could ask Netanyahu one question, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence?
For what?
BB, you've been telling us about this damn bomb since you've basically been the prime minister. Where is it? Where's the evidence?
Dr. Leon,
I know
they
where
can
it
make
is.
evidence for you.
No. I know where it is. It's in the stall right next to the weapons of mass destruction from Iraq. And next to that stall is the yellow cake uranium that Dick Cheney was telling us. They have this public storage facility. It's a secret public storage facility with the orange sign and the white letters and the little lock on the corrugated door. And it's there. That's where it is. It's not even in a mountain. It's just downtown Tehran. And that's where the bomb is. It's next to the WMDs from Iraq, and on the other side, in the stall on the other side, is that mobile trailer where all the biological weapons were being manufactured and driven all around the desert in an uncontrolled environment, so the biologics could not live in that extreme variation of temperature. I think it's stall number 77, stall number 79, 81, and 83.
Yep. I think it was Al Sharpton had said once when he was in a debate, he says, if they say that they have nukes and they say they know where they are and you invade the country and can't find them, then somebody lied.
Hey.
Yeah.
Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
George
It's just
Bush.
that all of them. All those people are full of it. The evidence doesn't even matter. It's not really even about that. Like, it's just they say what they need to say to get from point A to point B. My rule, as I've been telling everybody on the show, habitual liars lie. It's a flat fact. That is a rule of nature. Habitual liars lie.
Why don't more of those press corps journalists ask that question? Where is the evidence? Don't the American people deserve the evidence? So when Donald Trump is standing in that doorway on Air Force One, and one reporter says, Tulsi Gabbard said, and he says, I don't believe her, then why doesn't the next reporter say, okay, Mr. President, based upon what? And then when he says, well, that's a stupid question, then another reporter should say, well, it may be a stupid question, but don't we deserve evidence? Especially since your director of intelligence testified before the Senate, and her testimony is consistent with what we've been told for the last 5 or 6 years. There is no program.
I mean, that's assuming you have a free media. And I don't think we do. I don't think we do.
That's why I watch this show, because you point out important facts like that. Oh, okay. Never mind.
I mean,
next question.
There's no other way. Like, what is the other alternative? Like, I always used to ask the question, and either they're lying or they're incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
It could be both.
Or they're incompetent and lying.
Yeah. And I think Noam Chomsky said manufacturing consent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fair enough. But it's kind of weird that they always have this American point of view in the way that they think about this stuff, as opposed to this kind of just, if you're sitting on the moon looking at events, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're sitting on the moon, you ask that question. Well, wait a minute, where's the evidence for this? And then when they give you some dodgy sheet of paper with a bomb on it, you say, well, this is just a cartoon bomb, sir. Where's the actual evidence?
Acme Bomb Company.
Bombs
are us. I got it at Bombs Are Us.
Speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm glad you brought her up. Politico, there's a question on whether or not Tulsi Gabbard should resign in protests. And Politico ran an article inside the clash between Gabbard and Trump. Mm-hmm. Because as I pointed in that video where Trump was like, I don't care what she says. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty astonishing. You just threw your DNI under the bus. She's the person who's supposed to collate data from all of these other intelligence services provided to the president and let him make a choice. And you've just said, I don't give an F what data my director of national intelligence, the person who's supposed to know, by the way, who actually reads, because apparently Donald Trump doesn't read, and the coloring books haven't come out yet for him, that Tulsi Gabbard is supposed to be given to him. That I don't care what she says. I get it from God. I just, I have prophetic dreams that they're coming up with a bomb. That's pretty astonishing, right? You've just thrown the person who's supposed to know under the bus. You've effectively said, I have no confidence in my person who's supposed to correlate information for me. That's amazing. Even George Bush had sense enough to have a process of cherry picking information. Trump just pulled it out of his ass. So they point out that Trump was annoyed with Tulsi Gabbard on a few counts. One, because she put out that post or that tweet where she pointed out this one. She said, I recently visited Hiroshima, stood at the epicenter of the city scarred by the unimaginable horror of the single nuclear bomb dropped in 1945. What I saw, the stories I heard, and the haunting sadness will stay with me forever. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like Gabbard is trying to run an insurgent process of suffocating under the weight of an intel community of whack jobs, Zionists, lunatics, and neocons, and an incompetent first of trying to say, hey, this is a bad idea. You're going to war under false pretense, just like you did in Iraq. And this is not the America from Iraq. This is a different America. This is not 2003. Iran is not isolated. You are going to potentially drag the world into a nuclear war, and you're too stupid to know it. And Trump was upset. He was like, complaining to people, why is she putting this post out? I can't believe you put this post out. She's undermining me. And even apparently got into with her about it, saying, hey, effectively, you shouldn't have done that. Give me your take on that. I mean, that's fascinating, right? I mean, do you think she should resign in protest, for one? Do you think her resigning in protest is going to matter? And last question, do you think it's better to have somebody in who may fight the good fight and lose, as opposed to just not be there at all?
Well, let me answer your last question first. I always think it's better to have somebody in the fight. People ask me, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, don't you get disheartened? Why are you doing this? Because it's about the fight. I believe I have value to add, and I'm going to add that value. Mm-hmm. See, I think, should she resign? I don't know. That's her call. I'm not even. I've never been in that kind of position, and so I can't. I don't know all of the dynamics involved in a decision like that. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's a tough one.
See, I think there were a lot of people that believed Donald Trump was an anti-war president. And I think she fell for the banana in the tailpipe trick. And there are those who will tell you that Donald Trump believes that he will win the Nobel Prize, that the one thing that he really wants is a Nobel Prize. And so he spoke in a context that had some people believing that. I think she fell for the prank. Yeah. And now she is where she is, and she's doing what she's doing. Should she resign? I don't know, because it depends. To me, it depends on how she resigns, and does she resign and then come on major networks saying, mea culpa, I believe the man. This is what he told me when he offered me the job. This is what I thought my responsibilities were going to be. Mm-hmm. I fell for the trick. This is not who he is. This is not what they do. If she comes out and starts telling the truth and naming names, then fine. But if she comes out and just falls by the wayside, then you're the whatever we thought you were. You're a fraud. Yeah. So I think the answer to that question will come when she is either fired or resigned, because I don't see her long for that job.
No, that's a good point. That's a hell of a point. It's a tough spot.
It's not much of an answer, but
no, it's a good answer. The answer is appropriate. I mean, because let's be honest, it's subjective on some level. I think your answer is apt. If you can come out and damage the administration that is trying to take your country to war and send your soldiers back into a conflict where they're going to get killed, let's be very clear. This idea that Iran is running out of missiles, I think it's nonsense. They are being well funded with China, who's been sending cargo jet after cargo jet after cargo jet since this thing has started.
Remember, Russia was running out of missiles. Remember that?
And Russell was running out of missiles too. So I don't buy the premise. We have all sorts of military bases that are around that region. I think like 50, 60,000 troops. The idea that we won't get touched, I think it's nonsense. And if she really is a true believer in, I don't want my men and women going to die for nonsense, then she should do what you said. She should try to damage the administration as much as she could in order to stop another war. At the very least, put a kneecap the way that she could. So no, the answer is fine.
Let me. This is a semantics point. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say she should come out and damage the administration, because that then demonstrates some intent and then puts what she says in question. She should come out and tell the truth. And if the result of that is damage, well, then that's the result of that. But because as soon as you start talking about, well, she should come out and damage, then now she's on a hit mission, and then we have to question the veracity or the validity of what she is saying. Tulsi, because I know she watches the show as well. Tulsi, come out and tell the truth.
Dr. Leon, Always appreciate you, man. I really do. I always appreciate your take. I always appreciate your point of view. You know this stuff like the back of your hand. Dr. Wilmer Leon. He is radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, host of Connecting the Dots. What's the other channel? I always
Inside
the issues.
And let me tell you something. I don't like to announce my guests because things happen in people's schedules, but this Saturday from 11 to 1 p.m. Eastern time on Sirius XM 126 Urban View, I got a show. That's all I'm telling you.
You're not gonna tell us? Are you just gonna drop that? I'm not gonna tell you who it is, but there's a hell of a show.
Tell you what, bring me back Friday, and I'll tell you Friday.
I'll bring you back Friday. All right, my man. You have a fantastic day. Okay.
Right,
How's it going? Be safe. So bring me back Friday. I'll let you know. All right. Fair enough. Shout out to Dr. Wilmer Leon. Shout out to him. Before I go to my next guest, we have another great guest. In fact, we have a full show and a damn good show for you today. Let's go to chats real quick. Before I always say I'm going to do this, that I'm going to try to go to chats before in between guests if I get the opportunity. Coming up at 8 o'clock, we have Daniel Lazare, Esteban Carrillo. We have Colonel Wilkerson, and then we have KJ No coming up at 9:30 to round out the show. So, as I said, a damn good show. Black Spock, super sticker. Thank you, Black Spock. Kat Ferguson, again, super sticker. I always like it when you guys leave this comment, but fair enough. I appreciate it. Thank you. You keep the show going. I strongly suspect that they're going to demonetize the show also, so thank you for it. Nas Manda, keep an eye on the kneecap court zone today. What is the kneecap court zone? Court case, kneecap court case. I don't know what that is. I will look it up, but I don't know what that is. Maybe you can fill me in on it. Wandy USA, Tulsi knew what was coming. I don't know, Wandy. I don't know. I mean, she effectively went into the administration. I think Dr. Leon is right. I think she fell for the banana in the tailpipe. That she heard this is a man of peace. And you have these Muslims jumping around on stage in Michigan. He's a man of peace. And all this. It's one thing to not vote for your opponent. It's another thing to come out and say he's a man of peace. I guess I never thought he was anti-war. I just thought he was less inclined to it, all things being equal. But, you know, they're worrying signs at the point where the man is getting all of this money from Mayor Adelson, changes the location of, makes the Golden Heights magically, apparently, part of Israel. Meaning there were clear signs, especially when he got in office. There was no way to go with this notion that Donald Trump was a man of peace the moment that he got into office and put out his first peace plan and trashed the Gazans and you know, continued to escalate the war. The notion of man of peace was nonsense. I don't know what people are looking at this point when they try to convince themselves otherwise. You have some guest who comes on this show that would pretend as if, oh my God, Donald Trump is just an infant. He's just being roped by the neocons. He has no will of its own. It's like, okay, man, he's not what you thought he was. It's just that. Stop acting, you know, try to defend him. Wandy, a president can be removed from office through the impeachment process, which involves the House of Representatives bringing charges against the president, followed by the trial from the Senate. Wandy, that is true. Problem, they agree. Your intelligence, assets, infrastructure in the United States fundamentally agree. The Senate is not going to convict Donald Trump of this when the Senate predominantly agrees. The House of Representatives is not going to get rid of Trump on this when the House of Representatives agrees. When Thomas Massie came out and said that each one of these people effectively have minders from the Israeli government, okay, that's a pretty big deal. That's pretty wild, right? Like, you've effectively said that a foreign government is overlooking and is in contact with each of your Congress members to ensure that they act and vote in a particular way. That's pretty astonishing. I would even say it's anti-American on its face. So, yeah. So I understand where you're coming from, Wandy, but I don't think it's going to happen that way. But let me bring in my guests. I am greatly privileged to have a conversation with him. Daniel Lazare. Daniel Lazare is an independent journalist, author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, and government, social policy in general. He's written several books, including The Frozen Republic, Velvet Coup, and America's Undeclared War. Daniel, how are you doing today, man? You doing all right?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I am doing fine. You sent me a really good article that I had the opportunity to read, and I thought I'd put this thing up, but I'm going to put it up one more time just so I can access it and push it to the audience. I knew I sent this thing on Twitter. Journal of Marxist Theory. And you said why Trump's not a fascist and why it matters. And, you know, I guess the reason why this is relevant is because a lot of people call him a fascist. They say he's a fascist. He's, you know, everything but a child of God. But fascist was one of the first things to come up when they were talking about him, even when they ran a race against him. They said he's going to stick Liz Cheney up against the wall and shoot her in the head. Journalists was like, oh my God, he's going to get rid of our ability to do news, if that's what they call it. Go through the basic argument in this article, and I want to take parts of the article just as I read through it. Give me your take on the main thesis.
Well, the main thesis is that, I mean, everyone is throwing the F word around. Everyone is calling Trump a fascist. I mean, leftists, rightists, Liz Cheney, of all people, is calling Trump a fascist. And I think it's actually a smokescreen. I think, first of all, historically, Trump is not a fascist. Fascism was a movement that arose in the waning days of World War I during a period of revolutionary upsurge when countries like Hungary, Russia, obviously, Italy, even the US were gripped by revolutionary movements. And fascism was a last-ditch effort to overthrow these movements, to suppress them, and to reestablish order. But it wasn't just a conservative order. It was a order of the revolutionary right, a right-wing revolutionary movement that was as hostile to old-fashioned conservatives as it was to the radical left. So Mussolini was the best example in the 1920s, and he was a radical. He extolled violence, he celebrated violence, he had thousands of supporters under arms in his control. He was determined to create a totalitarian state, and to a great extent he did. Hitler, of course, was even more extreme. I think the Nazis had 400,000 people in arms by 1933, even before the seizure of power. These were vast armies in the streets, which were devoted to violence, celebrated violence, worshipped violence. And the state they imposed or they created was a totalitarian state in which violence, war, and of course racism and nationalism were celebrated to the utmost. Now, number one, I'm not trying to soft pedal Trump when I say that he is not a fascist. He does not do any of these things. He's flirted with the Proud Boys. He fostered encouraged a rampage on Capitol Hill, but he doesn't have hundreds of thousands of people under arms, and he relies on the traditional organs of the state, the FBI, ICE, the Army, the Marines, etc. He is, the liberals claim that he wants to overthrow the Constitution, but really it's clear that he just wants to use certain parts of the Constitution, namely the imperial presidency, in order to eliminate the few remaining democratic vestiges that are still left in this tired old document. He's in terms of military policy, the guy is erratic, dangerous, foolhardy, etc. And he very well may shortly bomb the Iranian nuclear facility at Fordo. But he doesn't, he clearly doesn't worship war the way that Hitler or Mussolini did. And in fact, he's been kind of skittish on the question of war. He got into a fight with the Houthis and then declared victory and got out after just 30 days. So his record is very different, clearly in a zoological taxonomic sense. He's a different breed of cat. So there's no point, it's like calling a dog a wolf, when in fact a wolf is a very different kind of animal. And when people like Liz Cheney call Trump a fascist, what they're trying to do is to conceal their own contribution to the problem. What they're saying is, they used to call Trump a Russian agent. Now they call him a fascist. And the bottom line is that they regard Trump as un-American, because America is this wholly pure, harmonious state that can do no wrong. It's, Tom Hanks single-handedly defeated fascism, on Omaha Beach, if you believe Saving Private Ryan. So America is good, pure, etc. So Trump, whether he's a Russian agent or is a fascist, they're simply calling him un-American. And they're doing so because they want to get themselves back into power. A discredited liberal elite wants to claw its way back into office, and they want to paint Trump as un-American in order to do so. And it's a scam, and the only effect will be to bring back Liz Cheney, and that is the last thing we need. So that's just my point. That's my argument. We don't need to return to the old regime. We need something new, and these broad fronts in which everybody from Liz Cheney to Naomi Klein to who knows who else, sort of join hands and sing Kumbaya in order to denounce Trump. It's just a scam, and it's a very conservative scam as well. So that was my argument.
I don't quite see how he's all that different than the other liberal order. He may have his different things that he doesn't like, but it's the same playbook. I mean, like, if you look at what's taking place right now, so you had Joe Biden, who's willing to go to war effectively with Russia. At some point, they were going to tip over. They kept walking to the line. You can't always predict what that line is. And at some point, they were going to cross that line, either with Biden or with Harris. Okay, Trump, for whatever reason, he looks at them and says, hey, we lost that. We're getting rolled. And as I told you last time on the show, as I kept pointing out, the Russians were taking them apart. And that is even more so today. I think you'd agree with me today. I think it's clear today.
Yeah.
Trump seems to have accepted, okay, we're losing that. So I need to freeze that. And while we freeze that, I need to pivot into something else. Oh, I know, Iran. Let's pivot to Iran. And so it seems that he's still functioning from the standpoint of empire. I mean, like, he's still looking at it. He just recognized, okay, we failed rolling the dice on Ukraine. So now we're going to roll the dice on Iran because I think Iran is the weak link. And that's going to be a link that can isolate China and, for that matter, Russia, and make it far easier in order to get back to Russia, or for that matter, go after China. Meaning, this is not a president that is acknowledging multipolarity, something that many of the other people in, let's say, the liberal order decried. Like Liz Cheney would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're acknowledging multipolarity. Well, just because Trump says it and he continuously lies, again, habitual liars lie. Him saying it is secondary to the fact of whether he's acknowledging it in the way that he acts. And I'm saying in the way that he acts, he's acting in the sense of empire. I may be lying about being okay with multipolarity, but in reality, I am doing the things necessary to maintain American hegemony around the globe, even if it means bringing us to the brink of nuclear war every bit as much as Joe Biden did. Give me a take on that, because it just comes across, he puts out a persona, not anything real in terms of difference. And maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe you can change my mind on this, but give me your thoughts.
Well, I think there are differences, but the continuities are really striking, especially on Iran. I mean, Obama negotiated the nuclear accord back in 2015, and Trump abandoned it in 2018. But Biden had a chance to go back in 2021, and he didn't do it. I mean, he essentially pursued a Trump policy. Biden, Trump was extremely belligerent towards China, and Biden was also. So Biden pursued a Trump policy in that, and now Trump is doubling down now that he's back in office. So yeah, the continuities are really striking. I mean, certainly there's a difference with regard to Russia, but we don't know how that'll play out and what will happen in the end. But I agree. I mean, the difference is that Biden was committed to NATO, whereas Trump is obviously very hostile to NATO. So that's really an important change. But it doesn't mean that make Trump any more or less warlike than Biden. In fact, it's hard to beat the Democratic Party neocons when it comes to warmongering. And Trump is bad, but I don't see him as in any way, especially bad or bad to a different degree. I see him as really essentially the same. Domestically, it's different though. Domestically, there's no doubt that Trump is, I don't know, whether he's crossed over or not by now is unclear, but he clearly is heading towards a straight-out dictatorship. I think that's obvious. The war on the immigrants is going to destroy democracy, and the war against pro-immigrant protesters will get ferocious. So real repression, in contrast to what we saw during the Biden years. But real repression is coming down. So in that way, he is different, and and the danger he poses is very serious. But again, it's just not the same as fascism.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was illegal to put U.S. troops on American soil.
The law, I wish the law was always crystal clear, but it's not. There's a great deal of yesterday or today? Bernie Sanders issued a statement saying the Constitution is crystal clear that only Congress can declare war. It's not crystal clear. And in fact, presidents have taken unilateral military action on their own literally hundreds of times. Thomas Jefferson, started it was in 1803 when he went to war against the Barbary pirates, and without congressional authorization. And Jefferson is one of the founders of this country. So even though Bernie Sanders says the law is clear, the law really is not clear, and so therefore it's not clear if it's illegal to put troops on U.S. soil, and you can't rely on the law to defend you against those kinds of abuses.
Ugh, that's terrifying. I know what I mean by that is
that will do it.
Yeah, I guess what I mean, built into that phrase, that point of you can't rely on the law to do it. These things are just written down. If nobody backs it, it doesn't really matter. They're just written down. Where do you think this is going to go with the immigration thing? I mean, the fact that he's willing to put troops on the ground and we are 4 months in, it's like buckle up.
Yeah, it's going to get really, really bad. I think that that there's going to be the Marines will open up with live ammo at some point. Frankly, these protests can only look at the Trump is aiming to round up 3,000 people a day. That is extra. Then you're tearing people out of their communities, away from their families, away from their friends and coworkers. It's wrenching. It's painful, and that can only lead to ever greater protests in the streets. And if Trump wants to meet those protests with armed repression, well, we sort of know what'll happen next. And the country is in a state of emergency, and the emergency will deepen.
Especially if there's a war, correct? Meaning, I was looking at the polling on the conflict. Well, I guess there's a few things. One, the polling on his quote unquote big, beautiful bill that that is atrocious. But also, when you're looking at what do people think about going to war with Iran? Well, you get right here 60% to 16% say no. That is a hell of a skew. And then even among Democrats, 65%, among independents, 61% among independents. And among Republicans, 53%, meaning he even lost Republicans on this. These are a section of his base. Look, the number of cultists that are backing Trump, those will probably not necessarily break away from him. But this is not indicative of a good policy, especially when you're already in the middle of a political firestorm with a bill that the majority of the public hates and with the immigration thing that the public hates. I mean, it seems like we're in for a hell of a rough ride where the government is going to be effectively fighting. I guess I've already asked this question, but I guess I'm trying to nail down the significance of it because I don't think it's minor. The fact that you have military on the ground at the start of protests against Trump means he is trying to have a fight right off the bat with the public of trying to pacify opposition to what he is doing. And this is not even everything hitting the fan yet in regards to opposition to what he's doing. This is only one element or one item, which is immigration. Where does the public go with this?
Well, I don't think Trump is trying to pacify anybody. I think he's trying to stir people up. I think he's a confrontationalist. But we don't know how Iran will play out. If it's just one 30,000-pound bomb dropped from a B-2 at 50,000 feet, and if it does the trick, I think I'm pretty confident the public will applaud.
Daniel, I've been right about all of this. I think you're wrong on this. I have nailed this the entire way through. Iran is not going to take, their public is not going to accept anything coming out of the U.S. like that.
Oh, I meant the U.S. public, not the Iranian public.
Oh, okay.
I think Americans will probably applaud. I think Iranians will be appalled and furious at the weakness and incompetence of their own government. One bunker buster could conceivably lead to the overthrow of the Iranian regime, which the U.S. would be delighted to see. I don't know.
I still disagree with you. I put it to you this way. I was watching protests that were taking place. The protests weren't against the Iranian government. I saw liberals, typically people who would be against their government in Iran, with hair flowing in the wind, screaming, "We need to get a nuclear bomb, and we need one now."
I saw that clip.
Yeah. My point is, go ahead.
I saw that clip, but it was one person. I also saw clips of traffic jams caused by ordinary Iranians fleeing Tehran to avoid the bombing.
Some of that stuff is AI. If you ask Grok, because I've gotten caught with that too. If you ask Grok, "Hey Grok, is this real?" And Grok will usually point out where this is coming from, and oftentimes it's not coming from the source that they claim. My point is,
yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm just going to say, if they do that, they will respond. And if there are 50,000, 20,000 dead Americans that are coming back in body bags, is America really still going to applaud Donald Trump for dropping and attacking a country unprovoked?
Okay, then it depends on what the balance of forces are and how this conflict plays out. I think the Iranian regime is very weak, and I think that its military capability is very low, and that the Iranian people are very unhappy with that. And so, therefore, I think that the effect of a bunker buster attack on the Fordo underground nuclear plant will have devastating political consequences for Iran itself, and could very well lead to the toppling of what I regard as a very unpopular regime. But I could be wrong. It's happened before, believe it or not. And if the Iranians put up a stiff resistance, and if that resistance hits the U.S., and if the U.S. finds itself in serious military trouble, then you're correct. Americans don't want a war in the Middle East. They're tired of war. And if this turns into a bloody slog, then Trump is indeed in big trouble. But if it turns into a bloody slog, Trump will be under pressure to respond even more radically. So therefore, Americans can find themselves dragged into a much worse conflict than they ever counted on.
That's true.
I don't think that will happen. But I am betting on the opposite. But you know, we can see what the options are, and we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out.
We will see how this plays out. And I've been making, God, I don't, it sucks to say this. I am not of mind that they are as weak as you think they are, or as weak as the Israelis thought they were, or that the Russians were as weak as many people thought they were. I think we have a tendency to over-evaluate our own strength and under-evaluate the strength of people who we don't like based on a certain point of view. And we are often surprised by the level of resistance that they put up. Israel full well believed that they were going to be able to pacify Iran. And I can show you images where Israel, Tel Aviv, Haifa, many of these places look like Gaza today, with these guys fighting over gas because their gas has effectively been blown up and they've been living in bunkers for the last several days. If it was true that Iran was that weak, Israel wouldn't be begging the United States to get involved in the way that they've been begging them within 24 hours of a premeditated, unprovoked attack. So we will see.
Let me just be clear about Russia. I mean, there's no doubt that the U.S. and its allies underestimated Russia's capability. And there is no doubt that Russia will prevail in the end. I mean, a war like this, like the one in the Ukraine, is basically an industrial, contest.
Yeah, it is.
Russia has, what does it have? It's like 4 times the population, 13 times the GDP, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no doubt that brute force will prevail at the end. And there's also no doubt now that the Russian offensive is picking up steam, and that the balance of power is tipping ever more decisively in Moscow's favor. There's no doubt about that at all. In the case of Iran versus Israel, I think that even though Iran is some 8 times larger, the same economic and military imbalance holds. Iran's per capita GDP, I think, is 8 times less than that of Israel. The Israeli war machine is a well-proven, device. It is
against women and children.
It should not be underestimated. I think that Israel controls the skies in this latest conflict. I think that Israel is a much stronger state than Iran is. I think the Iranian government is deeply unpopular with its own people. Its own people lack faith in the mullah's government. And so I see that as a sign of weakness. So therefore, while for the same reason that I think that the balance of power lies in Russia's favor, I think the balance of power lies in Israel's favor. And as far as American intervention goes, look, I mean, for the last 45 years, American presidents, since Jimmy Carter unveiled the so-called Carter Doctrine in January 1980, establishing a monopoly of control over the Persian Gulf has been a top U.S.
policy. Yeah.
And if one bunker buster bomb is enough to do it, then I think that Trump will be unable to resist the temptation, which is why I think he will go in. I mean, it will mean that he will have accomplished what Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, I'm trying to remember what they are, Barack Obama, et cetera, were unable to accomplish. And I think that's what what Trump wants to do. He wants a neat, clean, decisive ending to this conflict.
Daniel, what evidence? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He may get. Yeah.
I get it.
Okay.
What evidence do you have that Israel has a dominant military, short of shooting kids in the back or women and children and starving people? What wars have this modern Israel fought? They're in a proper war now, and they don't have control of their skies. Iran has air dominance over them. I've been watching this war for the last several days as it's been taking place. And again, I would like to point out that, not brutally, by the way, that when we had the conversation about what was taking place in Ukraine, you had a similar point of view that this is a stalemate, they're not moving. And as I kept pointing out to you, that is not the case. They were getting rolled. And it was clear that they were getting rolled. And I'm saying the same thing is true here. Israel does not have dominance over their own skies. They have drones flying and they can do air sorties. I agree with you. And they can hit Iranian places. But you're talking about a country of 8 million people versus a country 3 times the size of Iraq with 80 million people that can accept a lot more damage in comparison to the willpower of Israelis, who is not used to being under this level of bombardment and this level of just brutality, versus a country that has fought a modern war with Iraq, that has dealt with that level of casualties, even chemical weapon strikes. And if I'm being blunt, has watched them commit just genocide, with meaning a certain amount of they've earned this. I don't view these things as the same. I agree with you that the U.S. is going to get involved, but the U.S. was already involved. This was never something that was launched by the Israelis by themselves. This was something that the United States, as you point out, this was U.S. policy, regardless of the president. I don't buy this premise. They may tell Trump that, hey, a bunker buster would do it. But I would wager to you that they also told Trump Israel can do it on their own. Meaning they may tell the president anything because he's not that bright. And the president may agree with him and believe him because he's not that bright. But that is secondary to getting bogged down into a war that you can't extricate yourself from when they respond to what you do. It's the response part that I think you're leaving out. You think that they dropping one bomb is going to be the end of it. If you remember, when Israel first attacked, Trump was crowing, "Oh, look at this. This is fantastic." They may come to the bargaining table immediately. Meaning in his mind, he believed that first unprovoked sucker punch was the end of the war. And we're 4 days in, and Israel is getting pounded day after day after. I can show you the images. I can show you the inability to protect their skies. I can show you all that stuff. I guess I'm saying that is a hell of a risk to assume that one bunker buster is going to do it. And I have no evidence that that's true. And I don't know why you think that's true. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Fine. So first of all, let me say that when we spoke about Ukraine, which I think was in April or May, I'm not sure.
It's like last month.
So that would be May. It was Russian progress had slowed, and it was not clear what was going to happen.
Okay.
So there was a sign of a stalemate, but since then Russia's progress has resumed. And even maybe picking up, and so therefore there is a sign that that Russia's brute strength is reasserting itself. When we talk about Israel, Israel decimated Hezbollah, essentially knocked it out of the ring, and this is
just be clear, militia, just the militia.
This was a force that everyone thought was very powerful, a real force to be reckoned with.
It was a militia. They didn't even have air power. They didn't. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Israel knocked them out of the wing. And Gaza, Israel has leveled Gaza. Yes, Hamas fighters are still underground, but there's no doubt that Israel has imposed a brutal punishment. And in Iran, I think it's clear that the predominance of power is still on the Israeli side. The number of Israeli casualties are far less than Iranian casualties.
That's true.
Yes, Iranian missiles are getting through. There's no doubt about it. And the Israeli anti-missile defense system, is effective, but hardly totally effective, and that stuff is getting through, and that explosions are going off and people are dying. But I think that the balance of power is still on the Israeli side, and I expect it to remain there. So it's much like Ukraine. So yes, the Russian offensive had stalled for a while, and we were puzzling and wondering, what's going to happen? Is it going to resume? What's going on here? And then it did resume, because the balance of power again is on Russia's side, and I think the balance of power is on Israel's side. Now, let me just finish. So, Trump, if Trump goes in, if he drops that bunker buster, he's going to do so on the assumption that, in the belief that this will be the knockout blow, the coup de grace, and if that is indeed what it is, if he does take that step, and if his assumption proves to be correct, then the Americans will be very happy. But as you point out, things could go wildly wrong. And if Trump is drawn into a deep, nasty slog of a war, Americans will not be happy. And
before I let you go, I have to get one last question in, and this is on Tulsi Gabbard. I'm fascinated with the Tulsi Gabbard thing. We have about 2 minutes. When Trump was asked about, they said, well, hey, Trump, Tulsi, your DNI said that they weren't trying to produce nuclear weapons. And Trump said, I don't care what she said. And people took that as, okay, you just threw your DNI under the bus. And I'm super curious, what should she do in this situation? I mean, if indeed she's behind the scenes trying to fight the good fight, where she's trying to, they said at some point she was doing like a coloring book for the president because he doesn't like to read or something to that effect. It was something weird, right? What should she do with this? Or is there anything she could do in this situation? Is it resign? A lot of people are saying she should resign in protests. Give me your thoughts on this, and this could be the closing.
That would be the honorable thing to do. If war does break out, and if she, if it breaks out despite her recommendations not to take that step, then resigning would be the honorable thing to do. I'm not a Tulsi. Tulsi Gabbard is a fascinating person, but I don't worship at the Tulsi shrine. But if she I believe she was correct when she said that Iran was far from a nuclear bomb. And if Trump ignores her advice, just casually tosses it aside, then resigning would be the honorable thing to do. Otherwise, she'll be dragged into a conflict that she warned against.
And doesn't believe him. Daniel Lazare, my man, thank you for this, Daniel. I'm arguing with you because I appreciate the argument. And I like having somebody to push back against my thoughts.
These are important issues, very important issues.
And I don't want to be too certain on my point of view because that leads down bad paths. So I do like the pushback and forth on this, as opposed to having an echo chamber on this one. So I really appreciate this. Daniel Lazare, he is independent journalist, author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, government, and social policy in general. He has written several books, including The Frozen Empire, America's Undeclared War. You can find Daniel on X at DH Lazare. You can also find him at Permanent Revolution. For some reason, Twitter's not taking this article. Is that normal?
No, it's not normal, and I will certainly look into that.
Okay, I will try to put it up again. Maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. But you can find him at right here, this one is called Forum, but permanentrevolution.org. Definitely check out his article. It's a really good one. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. You be safe, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. So I want to bring in my next guest, the man himself, Estabban Curillo. Estabban Curillo is a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist currently writing for the... Did I say that right? This is an Ecuadorian journalist, currently writing for The Cradle. He was previously with Telesur English, and I think initially it was Beirut-based. The Cradle is a fantastic outlet. I know I say it every time you come on. I say it because I mean it.
Thank you so much. Always grateful.
DD Geopolitics. You guys have been doing fantastic work. and your coverage of what has been taking place on the ground. I've shown the audience the bombings that have been taking place. I think Dimitri called it justice. The way that he was looking at it, like people are just playing saxophone in the background, some people were watching doing popcorn.
Oh my God, Lebanon, yeah.
Yeah. Give me your take on this. I mean, you lived in Lebanon for a while. What is it to them to watch Israel get pounded in its cities, effectively looking like Gaza in some places?
It's I call it a bittersweet thing, right? Because just like the people in Gaza is the same, right? Or in the West Bank, you've been suffering under the thumb, under the boot of this genocidal regime for so long. You know, in Lebanon in particular, they're still occupying the south. They bombed Lebanon about a week and a half ago, the suburbs of Beirut. The aggressions are not non-stop. So to see a measure of revenge, or I think justice is actually a proper word than
I like justice
than revenge, because yeah, you know, like you commit a crime, you're supposed to face justice, and these are crimes. These are all crimes. You know, the crime of genocide, the crime of aggression, the crime of displacement, the crime of using starvation as a weapon of war, of targeting hospitals and news stations and schools. I mean, we could just sit here and list all the things Israel is guilty of. For Lebanese, these are people that are used as, and this is, again, the bittersweet part of it. They're used to war, unfortunately. They're used to war, internal war, civil war, war against the entity, war against ISIS. It's a never-ending cycle. So in a way, you grow accustomed to it, right? I mean, many people in Lebanon, many of my co-workers who remain there, they have, in one way or another, developed PTSD. They have, they are depressed. They are kind of barely hanging on in different senses, because you cannot imagine, like Jamal, neither you nor me really, or I would say many people listening can't really imagine what it's like to live under the constant fear that a missile is just gonna down the building next to you. And more than that, that is going to remain in impunity, right? That nobody's going to do anything about this, that the world is literally sitting on its hands, just watching and shrugging its shoulders and being like, well, Israel has a right to defend itself, even though that's, at this point, the phrase Israel has a right to defend itself is essentially incitement to genocide. It should be treated as such. But but the Lebanese at the same time, they are fun-loving people. There are people that love their country, and they are people that have grown in many ways accustomed to live under this situation, under crisis after crisis, economic crisis, political crisis, military, etc. You name it, they have lived through it. And yet they managed to survive. They managed to stand up. They managed to go party, right? There was this meme a few days ago going around in Lebanese circles that was like a bill for a bar. And it listed, the different items. At the very bottom, it said like a missile sky view lounge, and it added, a little surcharge for having the view of the missiles that were flying all the way to Israel. So it's kind of that back and forth that exists, right? It's it's you learn to laugh about the situations, even though it's truly horrific. Like right now, if full-blown war breaks out between the United States and Iran, Lebanon's literally going to be caught in the middle, right? And now with Al Qaeda next door in Syria, there's going to be absolute impunity for whatever they do, for whatever Israel decides to do in Lebanon, which they have always used as a bit of a punching bag, right? As a revenge for anything that they cannot achieve. They either take it out on Lebanon or often also the Palestinians. The Israelis have several punching bags to take out their frustrations in.
And by the way, they're doing it now. They've been doing massacres day after day after day. Honest to God, puts me in the mind of the Nazis. Like I'm sorry, I'm still here. There we are. It puts me in the mind of the Nazis in many respects. When Hitler's war machine is being smashed, and he is still putting metal materials, iron resources into death camps. And it's like, dude, you need those guards to help you fight back, but not fight back the Soviets. You need those materials to help you build your war machine. And yet he's like, nope, you got to exterminate the Jews. Got to exterminate the Jews. It feels like that. where they're like, we have to exterminate the Palestinians. And it seems like they're taking, I can't even show the images because I don't want them to shut my channel down if I show them, because they're gruesome. You have bodies just strewn all over the place. People holding their dead kids, other situations where people are holding their parents. One kid, his goat or donkey effectively fell because it was dying of starvation. Like, this is the scenes that the people are living through day after day. People who are going to get food being shot at and killed for going to get food. I mean, they massacred like 100 people the other day. I think it was like 60 or 70 today by itself.
They massacred about 400 since they started this scheme.
That's what I mean. Like, meaning they are taking out their vengeance on the Palestinian population, the vengeance that Iran is distributing upon them. They're not accustomed to taking this level of shots and bombs and having their cities in rubble. They're not accustomed to this. I can show you videos where these guys are fighting at gas stations because for the first time now they have to, they don't have enough gas or fuel because Haifa was blown up. I can show you Mossad building blown up. Meaning Iran, I was having a back and forth with Daniel, and he pointed out, well, there are more people that died in Iran. That's because Iran is not trying to murder civilians, whereas Israel are. Meaning Israel is hitting hospitals, meaning they have no issue hitting non-military targets to maximize the number of people that die. For whatever reason, Iran has decided to show restraint. That is not indicative of winning anything. That's just you being a bloodthirsty sociopath. There's a difference in those things.
Yeah.
Give me your take on just like how this has unfolded up to this point, and how do you think this is going to evolve? Give me your thoughts.
Well, as you said, Jamal, the Israelis did not expect the ferocity of the attacks, and I guess the failure of their air defense systems up to a point, right? Because the majority of the projectiles have been actually shot down. According to the Israelis, I think it's like a 90% rate of downing them. And yesterday I saw them saying that only 35 Iranian missiles made it through, which, take it with a grain of salt. They're currently, imposing very severe military censorship on any images about the attacks. So it's difficult to tell, right? And they are the same people that will, say that the UN is Hamas. So but the Iranians have obviously shown a capacity to strike strategic targets, including, as you said, right, the Haifa oil refinery, which provided about 60% of Israel's oil up until a couple of days ago, and same, for other places. I think there's also the Israeli claim of achieving air superiority over Iran, which I do think is true. Iran, their air defenses, it's difficult for a country that has been sanctioned for so long and that doesn't really have an air force to be able to develop systems that can, overcome the combined prowess of Israel, the US, the UK, the biggest empire in history. So they have, from what we have seen and we have heard, they have managed to destroy several of their air defense systems. They have managed to destroy several of their launch platforms. The Israelis claim they have destroyed missile depots. I'm not, we have no confirmation of that, but we do know that they have destroyed several launchers, which also explains why kind of the intensity of the Iranian attacks go, a bit up and down, back and forth in the first few days. Yesterday, the Washington Post had this report that was very interesting, in which they talk about that both sides are essentially rushing to not run out of missiles before the other. In the case of Iran, to not run out of the ballistic missiles that can cause damage in Israel, and for Israel's side to not run out of interceptors, which is
they got 10 days.
Exactly.
They have 10 days apparently. Yeah.
They have they said I think 12 or 13 days that they have at most. And it's not just Iron Dome batteries. The Iron Dome is meant to shoot down Hamas rockets or Hezbollah rockets. They need the Arrow system. They need the David Sling, and they need the US the THAAD, right? This one that shoots things in the atmosphere. So this is gonna continue at the intensity that they can manage, until the other side essentially has to change strategies. And Netanyahu himself said, this is gonna last weeks. Trump has said something similar. And the Iranians have said, we are just going to continue doing this until we punish the Israeli entity, right? Khamenei yesterday. He says, his messages continue to be stronger day after day. So I imagine that this is gonna continue in this way, and then at some point, if Trump decides to, just jump head first into this war, then the concern is going to be the bases, right? And Iran has capacity to start hitting bases because they're all so close to their border that they don't need, the high bar missile or the Fatah 1 missile that does all of these maneuvering before reaching Israel. They need their simpler missiles just to start raining down death and destruction on U.S. bases. And that I feel that's the way that it's going to evolve.
I think that is terrifying because I agree with you. I think you're right. I think Trump is going to get involved. I think that seems to be clear as day. I think part of the plan was for him to get involved. And I know, I ask these questions often, what's in Trump's mind? And I know people are like, dude, it doesn't matter. It matters to me because I'm just curious, right? They're right in the sense that empire moves in a particular direction. But there's several things that work here. There's this idea that, okay, well, these guys got into an air battle where Iran had missiles going back, expecting to fight a war with the US for 20-something years. Mm-hmm. And so they have missiles that had just been lined up. So we have no idea how many missiles they have at their disposal. We do know they've been preparing for the US for 20, 30 years. We know that much. Yeah. On the other front, the number of air defense that the US can make is limited since we've given so many to Ukraine right off the bat. And they've even had to shuffle items from Ukraine to Israel. Okay, even if you can shuffle air defense to Ukraine, you still have this issue of the missiles themselves. Mm-hmm. When you have a limited supply of, and oftentimes you're even pushing other governments to give Ukraine some because you don't have them, or at the very least, you don't want to give up the ones that you have for your own security. The THAAD system is limited in and of itself. The number of launchers in and of itself, and the number that they can make per year, meaning there is a limited number of these things that they have at their disposal to fire off. And so Israel gets involved into a war with a limited supply. Either they believe we're going to knock them out in one go, in which case this first initial attack is going to pacify Iran, or they knew they were going to get into trouble. And in getting into trouble, even if you get X hundreds of Israelis dying, that ultimately you're going to beg the US to get into the war, in which case the US was going to do it. Mm-hmm. Whichever one of those it is, I don't think it really matters. Ultimately, both of them end up being the same thing. And so I agree with you. The US is going to get involved. They're going to bomb Iran, potentially. Iran is going to attack US bases. And we're off to the races.
Exactly.
I think we're off to the races. Give me your take on Russia, China, and some of the other factors, like Pakistan, for example.
Okay, actually, let me just add something to your thoughts right now, which is these reports that, first of all, Pete Hegseth has essentially given operational command of whatever happens to Eric Kurilla, the CENTCOM chief, who is like an Iran war hawk, complete Israel, Zionist fanatic. And, this is this goes hand in hand with the situation with Tulsi Gabbard, right?
Yeah.
And it also speaks about, no, there was this also this other report I read yesterday on responsible statecraft, in which they talk about the window. Remember the window that the Israelis were talking about, that the window is closing for us to attack Iran or to cause damage. Apparently, the window was referring to Kurilla's retirement, because he's set to retire this summer.
That's it.
So this is what they meant by the window is closing. They meant the CENTCOM chief, who is going to do whatever we ask of him, is about to retire in a few months. It wasn't in a few months they're going to finally have a bomb, or they're going to be able to reinforce their mountain base. No, it was a U.S. general is about to retire, and we need to strike before that. That's essentially what happened. And now Hegseth gives this guy Kurilla, outsized command of whatever goes next. And we know that for a fact, it's just a matter of time before the U.S. is stuck in this war. As far as the other side, well, Russia and China have kind of incrementally been harsher in their comments, right? They have referred this to as an unprovoked Israeli aggression. They have condemned it. They have said that this is going to sink the region into war. I do not see China, in particular, eager to join the battle. they are doing their own thing, in a way.
You mean with military?
Yeah,
Agreed.
Exactly. No, and if at most, I would imagine they're gonna maybe, or they probably already have transferred, some systems. For Khamenei in particular, I remember a few months ago, for Khamenei, they sent like these laser-guided air defense systems that are meant to obviously protect his life. For Russia, I think it's very interesting because I think Russia stands to gain a lot from this war, from the very fact that all of a sudden the U.S. is funneling everything to Israel, not including their own soldiers, right? Like it's not just money anymore. It's not just weapons. Now it's actually boots on the ground and everything else that comes alongside that. And Volodymyr Zelensky must be the saddest man in the world today because he's just as forgotten as yesterday's handkerchief, right? It's just like, you're done, bye. So I feel Russia is just kind of waiting for that opportunity, right? Because at the end of the day, Trump's promises of bringing peace turned out to be exactly what many of us expected. The man is a snake oil salesman, and he has at this point sacrificed a large chunk of his base just so that he can continue fueling the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, that's the black pill, as Mark would say. It's like, for all these people who think that there's this kind of close relationship between Russia and Iran, maybe there is, but Russia has bared the brunt of empire for 3 years, and they have had to take their respect at the barrel of a gun, and they've done so.
Yeah.
The moment that this happened, Zelensky was screaming in the void. Nobody paid attention. Like, meaning I see what is happening on the ground because I pay attention to it and listen, watching Telegram channels and stuff like that. They are getting trashed. Like some of those attacks that Israel has been taking, like from Iran, looks like that in Ukraine. Like they're hitting Kiev with Kimzal missiles. I mean, those things are just terrifying weapons. And nobody cares. Nobody seems to be paying attention. And you don't even see it like in the headlines per se. All of the headlines are effectively taking place about the Middle East. So yeah, they dropped him like a hot potato. Like Mark said, always be aware of the mistress versus the wife. And don't mistake which is which.
Don't mistake your role, yeah.
Yeah, don't mistake your role. And he is learning that the hard way. Yeah, okay. So if that is indeed true, and that is indeed the way this is going to process, where this is the black pill. Russia is like, all right, thank God. We have space. Iran is going to have to take the brunt of this for a while. China is going to give them support. I would imagine Russia is going to give them support. They just signed the strategic partnership, amazingly, that just got ratified by the parliament of Iran. What do you think their issue? DD Geopolitics, one of the things they pointed out that shocked the hell out of me, it was something that Dugan said. And I was like, okay, maybe Dugan is getting this wrong. I don't think Dugan got it wrong. So this came out, and I want to get your take on why Iran is taking this tact for something that clearly was in their best interest. It says, apparently the nature of the agreement is different. The Belarus, North Korean established partnership relations with Moscow in the number of areas that we did not particularly touch upon. Our country's independence and security, as well as self-reliance, are extremely important. We are not interested in joining any bloc. This is Iran ambassador to Moscow, cited by TASS. So you're getting a lot of people who are saying, why isn't Russia doing more? Why isn't China doing more? Oh my God, why aren't these countries abandoning Iran? And I even sent Mark a message like, hey, dude, you realize if Russia is not being a little bit more vocal, they're going to lose friends. so even I'm guilty of a tiny bit of that. Their point is, though, that, look, they didn't want that. Like, they didn't want that type of relationship. Even if Russia offered it, maybe Russia even did offer it, they didn't want that type of relationship of being closer together. They wanted to be an independent entity left to their own devices. And so you're getting people out of Russia and China saying, this is what it looks like to be an independent entity left to your own devices.
Exactly.
Give me your take on that. I mean, why? I guess the question becomes, why? Certainly they knew they were in a rough neighborhood. They also knew they didn't have nukes. What is going on in their minds of this leadership? Is it malfeasance, incompetence? Like, what is it that allowed them to trust America, for one, to get lulled into a sense of insecurity? I mean, in the first place.
Yeah.
But what is it going on with this government?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now in the sense of the partnership between Israel and Russia is kind of and Iran is also this kind of repeat of what we saw on October 7th, right? Remember, Hamas launches their attack, and then 24 hours later, only Hezbollah joins the attack and in a support capacity. And many ask the question, why didn't everyone join the attack? You know, if Hezbollah and Hamas are essentially, you know, the reason for existing is the Israeli occupation itself. And Yemen, you know, has even in their flag of Ansar Allah, they have you know, death to Israel. And Iran, which has been the biggest backer of all of these members of the Axis, many people raise this question, in particular, you know, in Lebanon, like, why didn't everyone join? Like, if you caught them with your pants down, then just go full on and let's finish this thing. Let's get rid of this occupation entity. Then it happened with Syria too, right? Remember Syria? Right. We had this offensive that was approaching Damascus, and at no point did the Syrian government ask for support from the Iranians, even though the Iranians were there, like offering to help stop this. The Russians, the same. Although the Russians, they were saying they were launching airstrikes, but then we kept hearing that the airstrikes were essentially hitting empty fields, that we're just doing this for show.
Can I intrude just for 1 second? One of my guests pointed out, it was Kavor Almasian, the one who runs Syria on Analysis. He pointed out that Iran wanted Syria to launch an attack on Israel. And when Syria was like, well, wait a minute, are you going to help me with this? We've been under sanctions for God knows how long. They were like, no. And then when Syria wouldn't do it, Iran withdrew oil assistance, putting the country in even a worst case scenario.
Oh, wow.
So he is saying, again, I can't confirm this, right? But he's saying that ultimately that they wanted them to do this on their own, which made no sense. I don't, so sometimes Middle Eastern politics is confusing to me. Yeah. But go ahead, please continue. I just wanted to point that out because that's his case. That's the argument.
Very interesting. I hadn't heard that, but it tracks. It makes sense, especially given the way that.
Why does that make sense?
Well, to me, it makes sense in just the way the Syrian government just kind of did nothing, right? When Giuliani and his band of thugs were advancing on Damascus, it would appear, right? Like we all expected something to happen, but neither the army nor the Iranians nor the Russians really did much. So, well, having said that, I think what we're seeing now with the partnership between Russia, Iran, China, it's kind of a similar situation, right? In which the conflict, or well, the war currently only encompasses directly Iran and Israel, right? Although Israel has the support, the material, logistical, etc., from the US, etc. So there's really no reason, right, for these bigger powers to join. At the end of the day, the axis of multipolarity has not really sought war. They have not really, they're not the ones here championing expanding wars. They want to stop wars, right? That's why Iran was sitting at the diplomatic table. That's why China brokers the Saudi rapprochement. That's why, even the defense agreement that Iran signed with Russia, it doesn't call for cooperation in battle, right? It only calls for military non-involvement against the party that is being attacked. So Russia, for example, according to the agreement, couldn't join the US and Israel in attacking Iran. That's essentially like one of the main things of this agreement, but it doesn't say if Iran gets attacked, like I think North Korea and Russia do have that agreement, right? That if either one gets attacked, the other one kind of comes to their defense. Iran doesn't have that. And why with this government, this is, don't forget that this is a quote-unquote reformist government at the end of the day, the Pezeshkian government in Iran. This is a government that came to be after the death, of Ibrahim Raisi, who, very suspicious death, mind you, but nevertheless, I feel like if he had been alive, if he had been president, it would have been a completely different thing. It would have been a completely different situation from the fall of Syria. From the fall of Syria on to today, I think we would have seen a different Iran taking different decisions. I think they would have taken a much more leading role in this whole situation. And I don't think they would have sat down with the US at the negotiating table. I don't think they would have trusted the US in the level that the Pezeshkian government did. Remember, they didn't just kill Raisi then, they killed Amir Abdullahian.
Yes.
the foreign minister, who was, a brilliant diplomat and who was one of the people in charge of the Vienna talks between 2021 and 2022, when they were trying to salvage the original nuclear deal. So all of a sudden, you have entirely new authorities, which with a different perspective of the world. Although it is worth noting that the Pezeshkian government has continued with Raisi's policy, or the look east policy, right, of building alliances and etc. But at the end of the day, you're not the same person, and you don't, you don't have the same outlook and everything else, right? So I think if we ever see Russia and China involved in this war, it's going to take a lot more than just like the U.S. entering Iran. Even that, I would think. I don't foresee that, because at the end of the day, Jamal, Russia and China, they don't want to stop the relationships with Israel. They don't want to. They have at no point shown that they are, they haven't expelled a single ambassador. They haven't even, like they are really just standing on the sidelines, being like, trying to, for all of this to pass them by. And in the case of Russia, you have a good excuse. You are at war. In the case of China, and I guess, you're just so geographically away from all of this that you can simply be like, hey guys, this is really not my problem.
Esteban Curillo, thank you for this, man. I would love to delve more into that, but I'm hitting my time thing.
Thank you.
Yes, I would love to delve more into that. Thank you for that, man. I really appreciate it. Esteban Curillo, he's an Ecuadorian journalist currently writing for The Cradle. Again, a fantastic outlet. Check them out. I see them online all the time, especially on Twitter. Their stories are fantastic. So you guys do fantastic work, man.
Thank you so much, Emerald. Thank you so much. And we'll talk next time, okay?
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. I would like to go to my next guest. This is a fast turnaround for him, so I am greatly appreciative of him joining me. We're joined with Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He is former distinguished visiting professor at government, at the public policy at the College of William & Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He has also taught for 6 years at the University Honors Program at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., my previous location that I lived. He is also probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff for the United States Secretary of State, Colin Powell. Colonel Wilkerson, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining me so fast in a turnaround. I usually try to give several weeks, but considering what's taking place, I do appreciate you joining me.
Good to be with you.
So I've mentioned to you, I was very skeptical of these negotiations.
Where's Dennis?
Yeah. Give me your overall take. Isn't
Dennis Fritz supposed to be on with us?
Oh, I didn't think he was joining me. I thought he said he was busy. Did I get this wrong?
I didn't see that. I didn't see that. I thought he was coming on too. I was looking.
Wait, maybe I got it wrong. Let me check. I am a flawed human being, so I could have totally got this wrong.
You're probably right. I just didn't.
Yeah, I didn't see. Let's see. I thought he said he was. See, I didn't see a response. Oh wait. Yeah, he said he was traveling to Atlanta with his daughter. He returns tonight. I can't do it at 9 a.m.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I guess I missed it.
No, it's perfectly okay. I'm not going to keep you long, though. I just wanted to get your take on what is taking place. Try to give us some context for this. Because, for one, I didn't think the negotiations were real. I thought Donald Trump kept escalating what he wanted in regards to the negotiations. And this comes within the context of knocking off Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, etc., with Iran, the last man standing. Help us try to explain what we're seeing here, because this clearly is not in the best interest of the U.S., and this obviously has capacity to drag larger powers into the war. Maybe not immediately, but let's be very honest. Russia, this is the way of empire trying to maintain itself. They thought they could do it by taking down Russia using Ukraine. Okay, that didn't work. And so they thought Iran is the weak link, and they thought they had the opportunity with Trump being surrounded by neocons. But this could drag in other countries, considering China and Russia on some level, if not depended upon. It helps deeply to have a relationship with Iran and have it being where it is under its own independence. Give me your thoughts on this.
Well, your first question was the relevant one, I think, and that is, was Trump serious about negotiations? Yes, of course he was. He was serious at using negotiations as a ploy to lull Tehran into a feeling that they were not going to be attacked imminently, that negotiations still had a chance to succeed. Indeed, they were still scheduled. And so they came off their guard a bit, and Trump achieved tactical surprise for Bibi Netanyahu and for America too, because Bibi couldn't have done what he did without us in a most dastardly way. I compare it to Yamamoto and his attack in 1941 on Pearl Harbor, and I compare it to Saddam Hussein and his attack on Kuwait later. These are tyrant actions. These are the actions of autocrats, dictators, or reasonable facsimiles thereof. They are not the actions of a state, let alone the leading state, supposedly, but we have been majorly dethroned now, in terms of the law of warfare, international law in general, humanitarian law. You name the kind of law that we have spent years, since 1945, arguably, trying to fashion in the world as a part of the rules-based order that we love so much, and we have utterly destroyed them, including their prominent institution, which we really had the biggest hand in starting, the United Nations. We have destroyed all of them. And Donald Trump did it in one fell swoop.
Colonel, you were absolutely right. I went back and looked at that email directly, and it did say he would have to leave at a certain time. I misunderstood and I misread it. I sent him the link for it, so he may join us ultimately.
Okay, I was just worried he might be out there.
No, he may. That was my mistake. I just misread the email. But I sent him the link just in case he can join. Ultimately, even if he joins a little bit late.
I'd love to see his smiling face.
He's an awesome guest. He's a fantastic guest, and thank you for giving me a heads up on his existence. I didn't even know.
We used to see each other all the time, and now in the age of Zoom, we don't.
Well, he knows his stuff. He is a fantastic guest. The audience loves him, and I always love to talk to him. And I would have loved to have both of you together. That's why I sent the link to both. That's why I sent it to both. Hopefully, he could join, even if it's just for a little while. The last time you and I spoke, you said that if the U.S. intervenes into a war with Iran, we will be militarily defeated. Now, it seems that Israel, one of two things is true. Either they believe that they could win this. They've killed so many women and kids that they just was high off of the smoke from, burning babies, that they decided, hey, now we can do this. We're goosed up. Let's do it. We've taken out Syria. We've taken out Hezbollah. We've taken out all these other people. Now we can go after the head of the snake. And, when Ben-Gvir was confronted, he said, we had no idea that Iran had that level of power backing them, meaning they were just fundamentally surprised. He's like, we had no idea they had that level of arsenal, that they could decimate and hit us in this way, that we can defend ourselves.
They've been lied to by Bibi. They've been lied
to. Is that what it is?
After year by Bibi, because he has this incredible control. You wouldn't believe the control he has over what the Israeli portion, and by extension, the Palestinian Arab portion of Israel's citizens, 14 million or so, 7 and 7, he has incredible control over what they know. They only know what Bibi tells them, and that goes for the Knesset and other members of his cabinet as well. He has a lock on Mossad, a lock on Shin Bet. The Israeli people do not ever know the whole truth. It comes from Bibi's mouth and Bibi's mouth alone. The same thing Donald Trump is striving for in this country, but so far he has been singularly unsuccessful in accomplishing that. And that worries me, because this is a man who takes action when things don't go his way, drastic action.
So that leads another question. What does it mean when the U.S. gets involved? Because the U.S. will get involved. I mean, I don't know if it makes a difference between somebody telling Trump, hey, just give it to the Israelis, they can do it on their own, and then it falling flat. And the reason why I say that is...
Yeah, they can't. Bibi has already communicated to Donald Trump that he can't do it alone, that he bit off more than he could chew.
Right. It's that part, though. But in the very beginning, Trump was crowing as if this is a done deal. The Iranians have been pacified. And then within a day or so, you saw him screaming, crying to Donald Trump for assistance.
And Trump knew this in terms of Iran's capacity to respond. He just didn't want to believe his intelligence community, or he didn't listen to it, or both.
But why? I mean, is it just the people around him? Is it just he is not the man that many of MAGA believes that he is? Like, what's?
I think we're looking at the possibility of one of his first cabinet level appointments, departing, maybe not under her own wishes. I don't think she has the moral courage to continue to stand up to him, but she's contradicted him. Tulsi Gabbard has contradicted him. She told the Congress 3 years was the intelligence community's combined, all 17 entities, combined view on Iran's having a nuclear weapon, which I think is probably pretty accurate because I did a lot of work with the AQCon network in the time I was at State Department and a little bit when I was in the military. And as we look, you wouldn't believe the number of countries, Jamal, that wanted a nuclear weapon. It's never been revealed to the American people in any significant way how many there were. And AQ Khan, in particular, the father of the Islamic bomb, was interested in getting those nuclear weapons to Islamic countries, or at least countries that are majority Muslim, including a couple that would shock you if you knew that they were looking for a bomb. We managed to talk all those countries out of it. With one or two exceptions, we managed to talk them all out of it. That was a strenuous operation on our part. The British were helping us, but we felt it was essential because that was a massive proliferation of nuclear weapons were it to happen. So one of the things I learned in that massive process, interagency working groups with all manner of experts in them, was that it's not just enriching uranium or making a plutonium metal nuclear capable piece of plutonium. It's all the things you have to do once you do the enrichment or you get the plutonium to match it with a warhead, to ensure that warhead can withstand reentry temperatures, can withstand the other things that impact it when it hits this incredible atmospheric problem that ballistic missiles have, the missile itself and the mating of the warhead to the missile, and all manner of other tech. And you got to test somewhere. North Koreans proved that. They did a test we didn't even detect because it was so far underground. And they taught in this process. We watched the North Koreans teach the Iranians how to operate underground, how to do. So all that to say that Tulsi was probably right. The intelligence community was probably right. It would probably take 2 to 3 years before, even if they enriched to 90% or whatever, to match all of that with a usable, reliable nuclear weapon. She's probably right. Well, why did Netanyahu speed that up? Just examine Netanyahu's record. He has been saying since 1992, actually earlier, but 92 in a governmental position, that Iran would have a bomb initially within 2 to 3 years. Then it was 2 years. Then it was 1 year. Then it was a few days away. And now, of course, it's there. Oh, they're going to have a bomb. They're going to have a bomb. It's nonsense. He's also the one, of course, who said Saddam Hussein being taken down by the United States would clear the whole region. Everything would be copacetic after that. Wonderful after that. Well, those of us who've been watching him for years knew that, that's not true. It's going to be a very difficult war. We probably won't win it. And he's still going to insist on Iran. Precisely what he's doing. All to say that this is not a surprise. It's only a surprise to ignorant people. And I don't mean that derisively. I mean, they just don't know. Like in Israel, Israelis don't know because Netanyahu has such a tight hold on information. In our country, it's a little bit different. We have a media that is absolutely irresponsible. And they don't dig into things. They don't try to find out the truth. They just take Israel's word for it. Particularly in the case of Israel, do they not tell the truth? And back to your original question, which I don't want to let slip by without answering. When I said we would lose fundamentally and be sucked into a disaster that might be the end of empire, I meant if we really go to war. And what I mean by that is bombs are not even U.S. bombs, not even B-2 delivered bunker busters are going to get Iran's nuclear program. Period. They're not. So the only way you assure yourself of your ultimate goal.
Ground troops.
You invade. Yes. If we invade, we're toast. You think Iran was, or Iraq was bad, or Afghanistan was bad? Think 20 years and $20 trillion, $1 trillion a year, and hundreds of thousands of casualties. The American people are never going to support that, or at least I hope they're not. A draft, conscription, in order to fill the ranks of a very depleted army. Those kids will go to Mexico. They'll go to Canada. I mean, we've done polling, we've done testing. These 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they don't want anything to do with the empire's wars. Right. So that's what I meant by we'll lose. We may bomb them to Jesus and then say we've won, but we haven't. We haven't. You cannot bomb the software knowledge of nuclear weapons out of everyone's head. You simply can't, which is the challenge we faced in disassembling the AQCon network, a challenge we still face, by the way. There's still a couple of countries out there who have that knowledge. And at any moment, you could find out that a country you never thought would have a nuclear weapon has suddenly got a nuclear weapon. Could happen on the sly, actually, where it, like it did in North Korea, where we didn't even know they tested. We had all our sophisticated stuff up. The seismic center in Geneva had all of its sophisticated stuff up. We didn't know they tested. It took a second test that we sniffed a little bit better than the first one for us to confirm in our own minds that North Korea not only had a nuclear weapon, they tested it not once, but twice.
Wow.
It's a dangerous world we're creating. Very dangerous.
Are you concerned about other countries being pulled in? I mean, because
this is the example, Jamal. This is the example. Look, we're not messing with North Korea in any significant way. Why? That's what they asked themselves. Need a nuke. Need a nuclear weapon to keep the empire from, smashing you at its own will anytime it wants to.
No, I mean, other countries getting pulled into the conflict. Like, for example.
Oh, you mean
the way? Yeah, because I don't get the sense. I mean, part of the reason that the U.S. is going after, for one, this was never about nukes, right? At least I don't believe for a moment this was ever about nukes. This was about mastering and controlling. About regime change, right?
Yeah.
On the other front to that, there is a dual benefit to the U.S. who considers its power eroding in the world with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, et cetera, these BRICS nations and everything else. And if you can undercut China or undercut Russia, or for that matter, get rid of Iran, then you've eviscerated the BRICS or the center of your opposition right off the bat. China loses the ability of getting cheap oil from, let's say, Iran. China loses an ally that is in the Middle East. Russia loses an ally in the Middle East, meaning it seems to be about more than just going after Iran directly. There seems to be multiple reasons or rationales for it. Those other countries have to know that, which means they would be under pressure to not let Iran fall. Even if they don't, like, for example, China's been sending cargo ships left and right for the last several days, effectively boosting and backing up Iran. I would imagine that Russia at some point is going to start doing the same, even though they haven't necessarily piped up yet. Are you concerned? Yeah, please.
All that thought, and let me tell you something that's speculative right now, but I can see it being reality. Putin is destroying Ukraine right now.
Yes,
just
he is.
Ripping it from one end to the other. I expect any moment to hear that Zelensky's scalp is on a telephone pole outside Kyiv. Maybe this duplicity that Donald Trump showed glaringly with Iran, the sneak attack, if you will, on Iran, has been coordinated with Putin. And Trump has given Putin a free hand in Ukraine for Putin in exchange, giving him a more or less free hand in Iran and, of course, Israel. And let me tell you, Israel's tentacles go into Moscow deeply. They're money tentacles. And so I can believe that an arrangement like that might have been made. However, here's what I find very difficult to believe, that Putin would swallow Trump's promise to leave him alone in Ukraine.
Right there. It's that part. That's why I don't. That's why I don't buy that.
He's been burned too many times by Biden
Yeah.
and Trump. I mean, but it makes sense, even if he thinks he might be burned, because he can't be burned badly. He's already won dramatically. So he might think keeping Israel on that financial payroll, as it were, and the payroll goes both ways to the oligarchs in both countries, is worth letting the United States have its way with Iran while he protests majorly.
That feels so incompetent to me, if that's true. Like the reason why I say that is after the Minsk agreements 1 and 2, like meaning what is it of Donald Trump that these people trust? Like, you know, he goes, yeah, I don't
got to have something else up their sleeve, and I'm sure Putin does. And it may be simply that, well, you know, I'm just going to write Southwest Asia off for the time being. I've lost Syria. I've lost maybe Iran. I've lost a lot of weight that I had in that region of the world. But am I really that concerned about it? Now, China has a different writ because that was their replacement base road initiative avenue, if you will, in addition to the one they're building up the Persian Gulf, to the one they lost with Ukraine. Because Ukraine was supposed to be the entrepot into which the rail line China was about to complete into Central Europe would debauch its goods and its produce in the heart of Europe. Cutting, by the way, the fact they have to ship either through the Suez or around the Horn, cutting their costs by about a third. So it would have made their products even more competitive than they already were, because it would be a 16-hour train ride instead of a 2-day ship. And that stopped because of this Ukraine war. Now, Putin could reopen that at any time for the Chinese, but does he want to? Does he want to have that kind of commerce, you know, depending? Maybe he gets great transshipment fees or something like that. I don't know. But this is a very different world that's developing right now. And you've got 3 or 4 players in it that you have to watch really carefully. One of them is Putin. Another is Modi. Another is Trump. And that's a very difficult player to watch because he's an idiot. But we forget that behind Trump are about 100 billionaires, 30% of whom are Israeli-American citizens. So this is the deep state. The deep state is behind Trump. And if Trump ever does anything that the deep state does not ultimately direct or want, Trump will be gone in a heartbeat, I guarantee you. So this is a difficult world to assess right now in terms of where power is really going and what's happening with regard to it. And it's all in a cocked hat right now because we're playing with nuclear weapons. We are playing with nuclear weapons.
I would add one thing. Russia apparently did offer a security agreement to Iran that Iran didn't accept.
They signed an agreement, as I understand it. It's not.
They did sign.
It's not one like NATO. I mean, it's not
exactly, and it's not like one with the North Koreans.
Yeah.
But they offered one similar to the North Koreans. But Iran themselves said that they didn't want. I can read it. They pointed out that they wanted to be an independent actor. They didn't necessarily want to sign on to like a union, like with Belarus and Russia. They wanted their own independence.
My understanding, and this comes from intelligence contacts, is there's a tacit understanding between Tehran and Moscow that the surface was not the reality. The reality was a handshake underneath the surface that said, essentially, if you are attacked unprovoked, we will support you. Now, support is not defined. What does that mean? They're already supporting them. There's a second squadron, I think, of their latest fighter planes that may have been hit by Israel. I haven't been able to find out. One squadron had already completed new equipment training and was ready to fly. This second squadron was being trained at the time, had just started training. So those are really first-class fighters. And that was a substantial arrangement with Iran made by Moscow. I don't know where that is now. They may cut their losses now because the devastation has been fairly extensive. On the other hand, they have to consider the fact that the devastation in Israel has been fairly extensive, is unheard of in Israel's history, and is probably he shut it down. You can't get out of Israel now by land.
Right.
Yeah. He doesn't want people leaving because he knows if he opens it up, he'll lose 1 million people overnight if the airplanes can stand it. So it's a very tenuous situation right now on both sides. And I think that's why I'm hearing Netanyahu has begged Trump to come in.
Wow. Is he going in?
I think there's every sign he is. Every sign. We're moving all manner of. We didn't just move 30 or so aerial tankers, KC-135s and such. We're moving major combat power. This is another thing. This is not a threat to the United States of America in any way, fashion, or form. This is not a threat to the United States. And yet, we are taking our eye off people who are genuine threats to the United States. And we're moving combat power and expending combat power at a rate that's just unparalleled with Israel too. We couldn't handle China if we tried. We couldn't even handle a defensive war against China. We're so buried now in what Trump's doing with regard to Iran and Israel.
So play this out for me, and this can be the last question. If you're sitting in the Department of Defense, the president comes down and says, hey, we're going to defend Israel to the hilt. They're getting the stuffing kicked out of it. They have all of these buildings blown up, all of these institutions. Bibi is screaming for assistance, screaming for help. And you need to come up with some kind of, I suppose, plan to go after Iran, knowing full well, though, that Iran has allies. They're not independent actors. How do you deal with that? I mean, because that's ultimately what the Pentagon or the Department of Defense is going to be confronted with.
Yes, and I've got some insight into that. A couple of colonels may lose their job. The attitude of those who have a brain in the Pentagon, and admittedly, that's a rare group now because he and Hegseth have began to get rid of those who have a brain. Having a brain means objecting to stupid orders from the commander-in-chief and from Hegseth. He's actually holding Christian prayer meetings in the Pentagon now. And
Hegseth?
And there's an ultra.
What?
There's a reason for this. He wants to identify all those people who are, God willing, I'll be with you, like Huckabee, like the ambassador to Israel, who came back with a God bless chant for Trump. You are the man. You need to do what God is telling you to do. Well, this is Hegseth's mess. I don't believe for a minute that Hegseth believes all of it, but he's ferreting out those who will be complicit and complacent when he does things that are not necessarily the right things to do, like declare the Insurrection Act and go out with martial law across the country. And he's getting rid of the other people. So anyway, back to your question, they tell me that they have told their bosses, the flag officers, the generals and admirals in the Pentagon, that this is such a major detraction from what they consider to be the real threats to the United States, real, genuine threats, that they recommend wholeheartedly and powerfully against it. That apparently has had no traction with Hegseth. And I don't even know that it's made its way to the president. Now, I don't think that would stop him anyway, but it would at least put the sane people in the Pentagon on record.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my thing is okay, fair enough. I guess, but the question is, even if telling the president, hey, we don't think this is a good idea, and the president comes back down, no, this is what we're doing. I don't care if you think this is a good idea.
Well, that's essentially what he did to Tulsi. You see that? March.
Yeah.
Just 3 months ago, she's telling the Congress of the United States in a sworn-in hearing, she's telling them it is the intelligence community's view, which I'm transmitting to you, that Iran is 3 years away from a nuclear weapon. Trump was confronted with that testimony by CNN, I think, at his airplane the day after. Not after the testimony, but 2 days ago, I think. And he said, I don't care what she thinks. So Ali Vaez said a priceless remark. I think on CNN, he was being interviewed, and he said, so we went to one war because we fixed the intelligence, Iraq. Now we're going to one because we're ignoring the intelligence.
He's absolutely right.
Absolutely right. We don't give a damn about intelligence.
So your expectation is just a bombing campaign, or do you expect troops on the ground?
I think it'll start out just bombing, but they're going to find out if they're truthful. Now they might just bomb and say, okay, because they are 3 years away. What I think the bombing will do is make them 3 weeks away once they reconstitute, and they will reconstitute. But that might be a year down the road that they are able to reconstitute, and then 3 weeks behind they're going to 24 hours, not 8-hour shifts, 24-hour shifts deep underground. They could have a bomb pretty quickly. That won't bother Trump because he'll have already taken over the United States by then, been assassinated, died of a heart attack, or been Big Macs, or replaced by the oligarchs behind him. So, this is all kind of, it's all based on the time frame you're looking at. I don't think we'll invade because I think the military will be absolutely adamant with Trump that half of them will walk out of the building if he invades and puts ground troops in Iran, because that's a disaster.
I mean, but come on. So the military will walk out if the president tries to put ground troops, but will be okay with a bombing raid against a country that they know is not producing a nuke.
But also, it's the lesser of two evils, with the greater evil being so huge that they would take that compromise, I think. And besides, as my ground pounder friends would say, it's the Air Force. Let them drop their damn bombs.
Colonel Wilkerson, thank you for this. I've just sent Commander Master Sergeant, or I think he's
called Chief.
Yeah, Chief, as I call him, Chief. I just sent him an email apologizing to him. I completely misread that initial email. He said he could leave by 10, and I read it as he wasn't able to do it. I will bring him back on the show as an apology. I mean, I sent an apology, but I want him back on the show in general. Thank you for this. This is military analysis. I mean, it's a military campaign that effectively is about to take place. So I felt you and Chief were the two to have the conversation. So thank you for this.
I would have loved to hear what Dennis has to say because I haven't had a chance to talk to him in the last 48 hours or so.
Yeah, I will bring him back on. I am going to bring him back on as soon as I can get him. I totally just misread that email. But thank you for this. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, he is former distinguished visiting professor of government and public policy at the University of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He also taught for 6 years at the University Honors Program at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is also, and probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff for United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. You have a fantastic day. All right. Be safe.
You too, Jamal.
Thank you. All right. That is a screw up on my part. Whoa, there we are. Yeah, that's a screw up on my part. I would have loved to have both. I sent the email to both, and I just misunderstood one email as opposed to the other. But I will try to get Chief Fitz back on. He is a fantastic guest. Easy to talk to. The audience love him, and I enjoy talking to him. And I'm very curious on getting his take. Because if you remember, his thing was he wasn't sure that, to give an honest reflection of it, it was more to the fact of Trump could be pushed into it, but he didn't think it would happen because he thought rational minds would prevail. Rational minds did not prevail. I want to bring in my guest, another fan favorite, KJ No. KJ No, there we are. For some reason, KJ, I don't know your thing about heart yet. KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He's contributor to the book, Capitalism on a Ventilator. Uncensored by Amazon is available at iscenter.org. He is host of the ChinaReport that's on Breakthrough News Network, another great network and another great channel. KJ, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
It is a pleasure to have you. There are a lot of people screaming right now. I would say those people are in, how can I say it? I'm trying to be very specific with my words. Let's say in a specific camp of people that are, there he is, Dennis, can I, oh, the timing is off. Dennis, I'm going to have to, okay, fair enough. I'm going to have to bring you back on a different day. I'm sorry. Okay, fair enough. That was a mistake with the guest. I misunderstood one of the emails that my guest sent me, and there was an overlap. KJ, a lot of people are screaming right now that all things being equal, that there's a sense among some people, let's say in alternative media, that China and Russia are not doing enough. And you can see it on social media. You can see the screaming. You can see, I don't quite know what they expect, especially since the war has just effectively started. No other forces have gotten involved, at least not directly. The United States is definitely backing it, but they haven't necessarily put their own military in order to run bombing raids. At least we don't think so. Iran is saying that there's an American that they downed in one of the planes, but either way. China is giving resources. I mean, there have been cargo planes that apparently have been taken off and landing in Tehran for the last several days. There have been strongly worded condemnations coming out of Russia, China, Pakistan, et cetera, saying this is outrageous. Give me a take on this, on how you think China is looking at this and playing this, because I suspect just give me your take first and we can step into it.
Well, as you point out, it's early days. The US is threatening to attack, and it seems like the attack is pretty imminent. We're seeing all the kind of logistical preparations for an attack. So that may be the case, but it isn't a done deal yet. And under those circumstances, I think it's unwise for any other player to show their hand before, the cards are put down. So, I don't know what China is preparing. Certainly, they have come out strongly in favor of Iran, as has Russia, as has Pakistan, as has even, other countries in the neighborhood. They certainly don't want a war. But I don't think that they're going to show their hand until it's necessary. And that has always been Chinese, doctrine.
And it's pragmatic. I mean, the fact of the matter is they don't know what they're even going to need, per se. I mean, right now, Israel is getting taken apart in a way that I've never seen them get taken apart. It is one thing, apparently, to shoot women and children in the back. It's another thing to have to fight a proper military. And they're finding that out the hard way with their cities effectively turned to rubble. With the cargo planes that have been taking off and landing into Tehran, I know I'm asking this question knowing that you can't necessarily know entirely, but I would imagine that is missiles, some kind of air defense, like effectively a replenishment of things that they require, maybe even metals. Like, has there been any information that has been given in regards to what those cargo planes are? I mean, they've been turning off their transponders before they touch down.
Yes, there's no information, but the fact that they are using cargo planes is important because China can actually send things by rail, but whatever it is, it knows that it needs to get them in there very, very rapidly. So I think it's not unfair to assume that there's some kind of war material. These are huge cargo planes. They can carry all kinds of material. And I think that certainly the urgency suggests that whatever it is, it has to do with war preparation.
Yeah, they need it now. Wow. Do you foresee any situation where if Iran starts to wobble? I mean, because, a large share of oil that goes into China, let's say energy, that goes into China comes from Iran. You can imagine that if it's a more hostile government that takes over in Iran, if it's overthrown, that is not going to be the case. And that's assuming that they're even having a trade relationship with China, especially in regards to energy. Who knows what that government is going to act like, especially if it acts something like Taiwan and it's hostile. Like, do you foresee a situation if Iran starts to wobble, that China gets more invested, more ensconced?
I think they already are invested. I mean, purely in terms of the oil numbers, China gets about 15% of its shipborne crude oil from Iran. So it's a lot, but it is not a deal breaker. China has large strategic reserves. Anybody who's been paying attention to China's energy development, that it's going full out on sustainable energy. I mean, it is the world's greatest sustainable energy producer. We're talking about solar, wind, and also geothermal, as well as nuclear. They're bringing online entirely new generations of nuclear reactors, molten salt reactors, etc. So China is moving rapidly towards energy transition away from, oil and carbon-based, oil sources. So I think that's shifting. So it's not a deal breaker, but it is not good. But the other thing to remember is that it's not just Iran's oil, which is the issue. It's the entire oil producing region. If the Strait of Hormuz or the Bab el Mandeb or the Suez Canal are disrupted, then this results in an oil shortage for the rest of the world, which doesn't have, certainly the US, doesn't have the kind of sustainable energy grid that China already has in place. So the Chinese have been thinking this several moves out ahead. So I think that's the main point that is important to understand. Mm-hmm.
I am super curious on what China is thinking about the U.S. behavior on this, because you hit on a serious point. If gas goes to $400 a gallon, that is not just that is. I know Iran has said once before, there was we don't need a nuclear bomb, we have a nuclear bomb. And what they meant was, if we shut down the Strait of Hormuz, if we destroy Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., those governments have been, lady doth protest too much, right? They've been opening their airspace, they're fair game, just because they're now Johnny-come-latelys to Iran, because they don't want their quisling governments to be destroyed. A little bit late for that, especially if Iran is attacked. All bets are off. It's an existential war. Everything is on the table. The U.S. has to know that. And yet, they're still going with this harebrained policy of attacking Iran at the behest. Israel is a client state, it's a proxy, but all things being equal, there's a symbiosis and relationship between the two on this notion of getting rid of Iran for U.S. power and control expansion in the region. What is China thinking in regards to the way they're looking at this in a geopolitical sense?
Well, I think it sends several messages to China. I think the obvious point is that the U.S. is not agreement capable. We know that the U.S. green-lighted Israel's attack while the process of negotiation was happening. They were supposed to meet on Sunday, and everybody thought, well, we have at least until Sunday, and then they attacked, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on Friday. So it shows the kind of utter and total duplicity that the West engages in when it is quote unquote negotiating. Same as Minsk, same as any other process. Even during the run up to the Iraq War, there was this constant back and forth. All you have to do is do this, and of course we know that the war plans were already etched in granite. So I think the first message it sends is that the U.S. is not agreement capable, that is not rational. As I've said, it is in school shooter mode, so it is not something that can really be talked down, or it's a tough task. The second thing to understand is that what Israel is doing to Iran is is Israeli war doctrine. It's their shock and awe doctrine, and it's something that they developed during the Yom Kippur War. It's aggressive decapitation strikes deep inside sovereign territory, preemptively aggressive, always taking the initiative to quote unquote the enemy. This doctrine of war has become U.S. doctrine of war. So the U.S. has a doctrine of war called air-land battle, which is what they used on Iraq and other countries. And essentially, that doctrine of war is Israeli doctrine of war that it took from the Yom Kippur War. And then the U.S. has created something called air-sea battle. That is its doctrine of war for China. So the U.S. has already been preparing since 2009 a shock and awe doctrine of war against China. And all of this does is it sends the message to China that the U.S. Is not a good faith negotiator, and that it is preparing war just as it has been preparing war for Iran, just as it was preparing war for every other country that it is attacked. So I think that China is undeceived. And of course, the larger big picture is Iran is one of the key pillars of the multipolar world.
Yes.
And, it's the U.S. is systematically attacking the pillars of the multipolar world. First, Russia through proxies, and now Iran. And of course, China is next on the menu. For a while there was a little bit of confusion because really inside the administration or administrations, there was a bit of a question around sequencing. What is the best sequence in which we go about this? But now the sequence has been laid clear. So it's Russia first. Russia is the starter. Iran is the salad, and then China will be the main dish. Okay, so we see that strategic sequencing laid out clearly, and we see the kind of division of labor that has already been set up. And what is clear is that these are gross strategic mistakes.
Yes.
The thing is that none of these countries are going to collapse or fall the way the U.S. thinks they will. Certainly, the Ayatollah has come out and said that we are not going to surrender, and you are in for a few surprises. The analogy, and it's a weak analogy, but it's like the idea that you think that you can throw a punch and get away with it, but if your first punch misses and then you have to go down to the ground, then you're in for a completely different story. And without getting into a ground game, ultimately, nothing will actually shift. Air power in and of itself does not determine the outcome of wars. Ultimately, there has to be a ground game. And when it comes to a ground game, I don't think that Iran is going to buckle. We know this because in 1980, the U.S. used Iraq as a proxy to attack Iran. And boy, did they get their rear ends kicked, despite the U.S. Giving them chemical weapons, right? They gave them the precursors for poison gas. And, Saddam Hussein used, gassed the troops in Halabja and, along the northern corridor. But still, the Iranians came back fiercely and forcefully. I don't know if you've had Mohammed Marandi, Professor Marandi.
He was in one of those chemical attacks.
Exactly. I mean, but if you look him up on the web, you realize that he was 16 when he was fighting that war.
Wow. Just wow. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of delusional people out there that believe their own hype. And I think Israel was one of them. I think they got so accustomed to shooting women and kids, burning babies alive, blowing up hospitals, fighting militias. Because if you're talking about Hezbollah, anybody who's bringing up Hezbollah as a fight is talking about somebody without air defense, without a state backing them in regards to a real proper state. And it's talking about a militia. And if you're bringing up Hamas to me, you're talking about even less than a militia. You're talking about a band of resistance fighters. And Syria, they didn't fight Syria. They just used to bomb Syria because Syria, again, didn't have the willingness to throw a punch because they didn't necessarily want to get involved in a larger war. Okay, well, this was existential for Iran. And they thought a sucker punch was going to be enough to win it, apparently. Or that at the very least, when they get into trouble, that the U.S. was going to get involved. I think that's the wild part. That's why I think your analogy is apt. It's like, oh, let me get a sucker punch. Like my boss, my old boss anyway, he was telling me about being at a wedding party. And this guy comes up to, I think either the groom or a friend of his, and sucker punches him and runs out the bar. And he chases the guy and beats the living shit out the guy to the point where the cops are called. And when the cops come, he's tied the guy up in a thing, meaning the guy wasn't ready for that. It's like you thought that your sucker punch was going to be the end of all things. And your sucker punch wasn't the end of all things. And so now your buildings are being blown up. Your spy network is being blown up. Your spy network in Iran itself is even being taken apart in many respects. Like you've expended a lot of capital in regard to the buildings that are being blown up. I can show images of Israelis not even having fuel now. They're sitting in a gas station fighting each other because they don't have fuel. They've been sitting in bomb shelters almost 24 hours. That is not sustainable over the course of several days when it's pretty clear that you're bombing, meaning they're not going to run out of missiles, but you will run out of air defense because you can see it as we're looking at it. Less and less air defense goes up, I would imagine, because they're trying to conserve it. And so it seems like all of this was planned to get the U.S. involved in it, one way or the other, whether Trump was stupid enough to believe that the Israelis can take it on their own or whether Trump just agreed. And I don't know if it matters one way or the other, but I agree with this bad strategy. You lost the war in Ukraine, and now you're embroiling yourself into a war in Iraq while the war in Ukraine is still going. You've given over air defense for 3 years, missiles, guns, bullets, all this stuff for 3 years. And now you are at a lack of it in your campaign in Israel. And you're supposed to now pivot to China? This seems mad to me. But maybe you have a better way of organizing this. It seems desperate, and maybe desperate in a way that doesn't necessarily seem to make all that much sense.
Well, I think the desperation part is certainly real, as is the irrationality. It completely doesn't make sense unless you have a very distorted view of reality, unless you think like the neocons do, that you invent your own reality. So this is absolutely delusional, right? So they're already low on weapons, munitions. They also know that their supply chain, in particular rare earth elements, comes from China, right?
That's right.
And so they're going to go to war with China, or they're going to go with Iran, which is a major ally of China. And they don't think that that their supply chain doesn't rely on China, which has come out strongly in opposition, not only to the war but to Israeli aggression. I mean, they've taken sides. So there is a deep and profound irrationality, but we also have to remember that irrationality characterizes the imperial West. The capitalism is irrational at its core, from top to bottom. It's irrational. Any society that believes that brown sugar, sparkling sugar water can cure everything for you, is a fundamentally irrational society. And I think that people simply get high on their own supply. They imbibe the constant propaganda. And then they believe that they are capable of doing things that they are not actually capable of. But in the meantime, it's incredibly dangerous. And there's so much damage that is created. And so this is why we see this nonstop chaos. What is it? 100 plus countries, invaded since World War II. I mean, we lose count at a certain point.
Is there anything that will bring China into the war directly? I know that's a hard question to answer, especially from here.
It is a hard question to ask, but let's think about some of the precursors or the historical examples. During the Kosovo War, the U.S. bombed the Chinese embassy not once but 6 times with guided munitions, and they killed embassy staff, including a newlywed couple, who were just journalists. Did China, and that could be considered an act of war. Did China go to war then? No, it didn't. Okay, it waited out, and it took the apology, but it didn't start a war. China is very, very slow, very, very reluctant to rouse to war. They're thinking of this in different terms. They're thinking of it in terms of probably the way that they conducted their own civil war, which is you do not confront the monster head on. You do not fight head on. What you do is you surround the city from the countryside and you build connections with everybody. The People's Liberation Army, actually the 4th Route and 8th Route Army at the time, simply just constantly build connections with all the communities, all the towns, all the ethnic minorities, which is why they're so strongly supported by the ethnic minorities. And then when they were ready, they knocked out the KMT. And I don't think China feels that it's ready right now to go directly to kinetic war. Iran is still a long distance away. There's India and Uzbekistan between Iran and China. So if it were to try and project power over those long distances, it would be pulled off. So it's a little bit like, in the martial arts, the Tai Chi, fighter, they will not act out of balance. They will always wait for you to come to them before they unbalance you. And that's what they're preparing. So I don't see China as getting involved kinetically, but I think there are other asymmetrical means. Certainly, China understands the score. It understands what the strategic sequencing is. It understands that what the U.S. Is doing to Israel is also what it has planned for China itself. And it will, I think, defend itself at the time and at the place of its own choosing.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. It is a heavy lift to go kinetic into a war where you're dragging your country into, especially against what is most likely going to be another superpower. If you can use your own proxy, in this case, and that proxy at this point would be Iran, who is in an existential fight, you're better off at that distance. I mean, this goes to the whole thing for Iran and Syria too, right? But Iran sat there and didn't necessarily, let's say, get involved in a way that would have allowed it some distance from the front, even though the wolf was coming and the monster was slowly walking through the countryside, coming to its door. And I guess I feel the same way about China and Russia. The monster is slowly walking through the countryside, taking its time, going from house to house, and would eventually be at their door. And is their lot in life better with Iran still on the chessboard or off? And the same thing is true for Russia. Is their lot in life better with it being on the chessboard or off? And if the response is, well, it's better that it is on the chessboard because we have far more strategic options, if it is, and if China and Russia knows that, does that force them into this, even if it's not direct in the context of Iran, but even if it's against Taiwan, or even if it's Russia just going bananas in Ukraine, meaning they both have to know what is happening here in a geopolitical sense. That in the same way that Ukraine wasn't really about Ukraine, Iran is not exactly entirely about Iran by itself. There are geopolitical consequences with the empire trying to maintain itself. And if Iran wins, empire dies. I mean, that is a hell of a dagger to put into the chest, the throat cavity of an empire that has been ravenous, that has been knocking through countries left and right. If Iran loses, that's different. That's all. That's the reason why I asked. It just seems like there is larger geopolitical significance to Iran existing, even beyond Syria existing, that I think if Iran could go back in time, maybe it would have been better for Iran if Syria was still on the map, as opposed to where it is now, with those missiles flying perfectly through Syria, with those planes being loaded perfectly through Syria. That's why I asked. I'm not asking this because I want a world war, even though that seems to be where it's going. I'm asking this because it seems like the goal of isolate and conquer and then move to the next seems to be in play, even though they're incompetent in the way they do it.
Yeah, so this is a very, very critical and dangerous juncture. Clearly, the sequencing is happening. They're trying to chew through these different countries as they get closer and closer to China. Now, the thing to note is that it's not working. Everything that they have planned is not going to plan, despite the viciousness, the aggressiveness, the sheer genocidal intent of this. But let's think of the counter factual scenario that China was pulled into a war with Iran. What do you think the response in the U.S. would be, or in the U.S. ruling class would be?
Just to be clear, I just want to nail down. I'm not saying that China should get involved.
Yeah.
And it is. I don't think any country wants to be on the brink of a nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my argument is based in what I've been seeing. Mm-hmm. That everything that these countries have tried to do mm-hmm. has only bought them what they haven't wanted. Mm-hmm. And so Syria is trying to be an appeasement country. It mm-hmm. gets taken down. Lebanon, Hezbollah, they get trashed and just, decimated. Iran has done anything in their power to negotiate. And what happened? They used that negotiation as a ploy to attack Iran. And mm-hmm. just because Iran is standing now, they have taken heavy mm-hmm. casualties and damage, just like Israel has taken damage. Mm-hmm. And even with Russia, with the Minsk agreements, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Russia mm-hmm. was going to be able to withstand the economic and military might of all of NATO and the mm-hmm. U.S. combined. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what's going to happen with Iran in this situation. They could fall mm-hmm. in real terms. So my argument is not China should get involved. I want to make that very clear. I am even squishy saying that Iran was wrong for appeasement. Mm-hmm. That I make that argument only from the context of where we are now, in the sense that all these countries, as they collapse, now you're by yourself, and now you have to fight this war alone. Mm-hmm. But that is illustrative of something, right? And if that monster was always coming to your door, do you want to deal with that monster single-handedly, one-on-one, or do you want to deal with that monster with other countries in coordination? And I guess when I'm looking at China and I'm looking at Russia, yes, they're helping, they're giving assistance. And they're giving assistance in a similar way that they gave to Russia. We don't want to be a part of this. We will help you in everywhere we can for you to fight back that monster off. And maybe if we give you enough assistance, you can fight it off. If we get involved, then this immediately escalates to a potential war, third world war, where nuclear missiles can be exchanged, and we don't want that. The problem that I have is that the proactive component to that is always willing to put nukes on the table. Meaning the U.S. is always willing to put nukes on the table. Like the very act of what they're doing in Iran is putting nukes on the table and saying, if anybody else gets involved, you know what can happen, which forces everybody to back away from that process. I don't know. It's complicated. I don't know a way out of that box. I just don't. And maybe that's what I'm banging my head on. Give me a breakdown of it, though. Maybe you can give me some better assessment that I'm coming up with?
Well, once again, I don't want to get, too much into the history, but, China has always had very good relations with Iran. And for example, during the Tang Dynasty, they were very, very close to the Sasanian dynasty. And when the Sasanian dynasty was attacked, China, the Tang dynasty did send troops and tried to fight alongside it. It wasn't one of their major expeditions, and eventually the empire fell, and the leaders of the Sasanian empire, they actually just went to China and became high court officials. And so they gave refuge and they became part of the Chinese, court, but they did not, stick it out and fight. So China is averse to foreign adventures. It is averse to fighting wars in other countries. But that doesn't mean that it won't give, support. And certainly the closer it comes to the boundaries, the stronger the support will be. The example being, for example, Korea. During the Korean War, China sent 3 million troops and workers and handed the U.S. the first strategic loss, really, after World War II. Same thing in, for example, Vietnam. In the case of Vietnam, China sent 300,000 troops, not as large as Korea, but still significant. They didn't send, troops that were actually fighting, but they sent, technicians and people to man, air defense, etc. So they have their own logic and strategy, and they see their own, capacities. They measure their own capacities. But what they don't want is to be pulled into a war that the U.S. wants to initiate, because we know that the U.S. wants to initiate a war right now, and they would like nothing better than to say, look, China is part of the axis of evil, and therefore we're going to, trigger our war right now using Taiwan, Korea, Japan, and the Philippines. I mean, this is what's being set up right now. The Chinese are not going to be pulled into the U.S. game. They're going to react on their own time, at their own measure, and when they feel that they need to act decisively. And I know it's frustrating. People say,
"No, I'm like I told you, my thinking. Look, I was born and raised in this country, right? My understanding of the world is through an American context, and in the same way that we are over there right now saying we're going to fight for Israel, which is just madness to me, right? But it is a proactive, meaning we built our military in order to attack. We didn't build a military for defense. We didn't do air defense per se. We built airplanes in order to go and bomb and decimate and kill as many people as possible. How could I not be infected with that mindset? So this is not me. I'm not taking an argument that China should get involved. I guess I'm asking strategic questions. And those strategic questions are real. Like, meaning China can take that point of view. God bless them. They can do it. Russia can take that point of view if it wants. God bless them. Iran took that point of view. And Iran is out there by itself right now, dealing with a monster that's at its gates, that is trying to take its heart out, that has murdered hundreds of thousands of human beings and will murder every man, woman, and child in Iran if it had the opportunity to do so. Meaning I'm trying to set the stakes to what Iran is effectively facing. And that is the same monster that is being backed by Europe and backed by America. And that if it gets the opportunity, would do the same thing to Russia. And if it gets the opportunity, would do the same thing to China. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the US is obviously trying to create a NATO for China. The US has already created a NATO for Russia. Russia's already fighting NATO as we speak, with basically being militarily surrounded, even though Russia has been able to hold its own and push back the monster from its gates, per se. It's still in that fight, and it's winning that fight, but it didn't know, did not know off the top of his head if it could do it, especially starting off with 150,000 people. And I understand China's point, right? Like, we are not going to involve our people into a conflict if we can avoid it. I totally get it. And I would be the same, especially this early. It'd be like, okay, let's let this play out. Like Obama, let it play out. Let's see what happens. Maybe the US doesn't get involved. Maybe there's a de-escalation. Maybe Trump comes back from the brink. And so the people screaming that China should immediately flip out of their minds when you don't really know what is happening on the ground in real terms. The fact that they're giving military assistance is a big help by itself, just like it was with Russia and China. Just keeping the supply lines open is a phenomenal help. So I just want to be very clear. I know it sounds like, and even as I say it, it sounds like I'm making this argument of, hey man, there's a monster coming. You better beware that there's a monster coming. It's that. But the argument is not that they should get involved. The argument is, I guess I'm curious on how they view it, knowing that the monster is coming and knowing that if Iran falls, that they're left alone. They could say that we're working in tandem with Russia, fair enough, but they will be militarily diminished by every bit as much as Syria was military, or Russia was military diminished by Syria collapsing. I don't know an answer to that. And maybe that's why I folded in my head this way.
I have, first thing, I think it's not what you're saying, but I do hear it as kind of a general argument. Why isn't China doing this, that, and the other? And then, how do they see it? I have no particular interest, no particular insight into the what the Chinese government is thinking or planning.
Strategy-wise,
All I know is that they're thinking about it very, very hard, and they're working strategically, and they're also thinking long-term about it. I think the other thing to point out is I think China really wants a different paradigm of global affairs. They want a different paradigm of security. The Western approach is, somebody's fighting, you just go in there and, just pile into the fight. It's a bar fight, everybody join in, that's their mindset. The Chinese don't think that way. They want to see if they can shift things in a different direction. The realist view, this is, and others, the realist view is that when you have this type of situation, the only way to resolve it or to balance it is to bandwagon, right? So you bandwagon on one side or the other, and then what that results in is greater and greater escalation. The Germans are already piling in. Germans were already, sending tanker planes, right, to help the Israelis. And now they're coming out and saying, Iran needs to negotiate. If they negotiate, we can find a good way to end this. That's BS, right? They were negotiating. For them to come out and say that is absurd. But once again, if we get into this realist paradigm where you're simply bandwagoning on both sides, then the war simply gets bigger and bigger and more intense. China's approach is, can we have a different approach to things?
GPS signal lost.
Sorry about that.
You're fine.
The Chinese approach is, can we move away from this realist paradigm into a paradigm of mutual security where we don't have to be constantly seeking and looking for war? The Chinese say the Chinese are very reluctant to go to war. If you go to the Chinese capitals, look at all their streets. They're named for peace. The great peace, the long peace, the earthly peace, the heavenly peace, etc. In the U.S., all the streets are named for war. They're named for right? It's a completely different mindset. The Chinese say that if you have good iron, you do not use it to make nails. Okay? What does that mean? It means that there are better uses of humans and resources than to deploy them in war. So they are thinking things in a different way. They want to create, as far as I can tell, a shift away from this, Western paradigm of constant war and de-escalate. And also the truth that, you have a very, very dangerous, belligerent, as I said, school shooter at your door. What we see right now is, let's just put ourselves in Iran's shoes. They've had their top military and government, a large part of their top military and government officials killed, right? In an aggressive war that was unprovoked. If you can, imagine that, Iran or China or some other country had killed off, Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, as well as your negotiators, and had also killed off Palmer Luckey and that, Palantir. What's that?
Yeah, Palantir. I know you're talking about the guy who looked like he touches himself to killing puppies. I know you're talking about.
Right. And Eric Schmidt, and all these people had been killed off preemptively, and entire blocks razed, while this was happening. How would the U.S. respond to this? This is what has just happened, right? So how is Iran going to respond to that? Are they simply going to capitulate and, surrender as Trump has demanded? Or are they going to fight back? Let's look back at the historical example when Iraq attacked Iran. Iran was actually in complete chaos at the time. It had just had the revolution. Iraq attacked because it considered Iran to be at its weakest. Its army was in complete disarray because of the revolution. And yet, within months, they reconstituted their capacity to fight. They sent waves of children to fight, of which, Mohammed, Professor Sayed Marandi was one of these, very, very young soldiers. And they fought this kind of brutal World War I type of battle, and they prevailed despite, being gassed and attacked with, chemical weapons. So I think that anybody who thinks that this is going to be a cakewalk for the United States or Israel is completely misguided. As I said, it goes down to the ground. At the end, all wars involve ground wars. And if it goes down to the ground, neither Israel nor the U.S. Have the capacity to prevail. They will find themselves in yet another Iraq.
I think I understand your point. To summarize, this is any notion that Iran is going to collapse is nonsense. And this is going to be a far more protracted war. And because it's going to be far more protracted, the assistance that China or maybe even Russia or Pakistan or North Korea would give is going to be a massive and necessary lifeline. But if any of these countries get involved militarily, they only make the situation worse and inflame it, and even bring the world to the brink of nuclear devastation. And so even though it is going to be a tough day, to put it radically mildly for Iran in the sacrifice that they're going to have to make, that overall it's a better outcome than bringing the world to nuclear oblivion by everybody piling in the way that the U.S. would. Is that fair? The way to put it?
I think that's a fair summary. I mean, it's all, we don't know. There are too many unknowns in this, but I think that we can say that an immediate escalation, which
it's insane. Yeah,
what will happen to World War is not the best outcome. Whatever happens will be protracted, and because it's protracted, this gives room for measured approaches, including negotiation as well as logistical support. But whatever the U.S. is getting into, it is getting into something that it doesn't know that it's not prepared for. I mean, just kind of the general thing. I said, the Chinese don't like war. They're not a warrior, class. It's not a warrior culture. And this is because, again, this is, this is my opinion, is humans are not designed to kill each other. Okay. It's actually really hard for humans to kill other humans. And when they do, first, it requires tremendous training, indoctrination, and kind of a killing of your own soul in order to prepare that process. And then even after this, after they perpetrate these kinds of murders, many, not all, because there is a psychopathic class, but many of them suffer tremendously after this. You look at all the vets that come back from, for example, U.S. wars. They come back with PTSD. That PTSD is really moral injury. It's not caused because you were, because you were injured or because the people around you, your comrades were killed. It's because you were a perpetrator or a witness to atrocities that your, moral framework finds unacceptable. It's kind of assertion that you're not psychologically weak. That used to be the traditional framing, that you were psychologically weak and therefore you're not tough enough, and therefore you came back traumatized. No, it's because you're ethically strong, and your strong ethics does not allow such extraordinary violations, of humanity. So it's not easy for humans to kill other humans. What's necessary is distance. So modern war is all about creating physical distance. It's also about creating psychological distance, othering, and it's also about, and so that's the work of propaganda. And it's also about creating moral distance, that we are morally superior to them. That's why all you have to do is look at Israeli propaganda. You see this process of distancing that facilitates and enables this murder, this murderous, rampage. But at core, the act of war against your own species, the killing of your own species, is actually a very, very unnatural thing that requires tremendous manipulation and tremendous indoctrination, and still works imperfectly, which is why anytime you go to war, you come back and you will see the blowback in your own communities. People who come back are ravaged, destroyed, they have moral injury, or they perpetrate the same kind of violence against their own society, because once you've turned on, they don't know how to turn off. It's something that the chicken hawks don't really understand, because they've never been to war. They sit back in their comfortable, houses and just dream up of these plans of domination and violence, but it never works out that way. Just one more example. During the Civil War, they have done analyses of, the Civil War soldiers, and they used to have these guns. I forget the word, but you have to load them individually.
Right.
Each shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Flint rifles.
Yes, those rifles. And, historians have gone back and looked at these large Civil War battles and rifles, and they find that, these rifles are often stuffed with, 10, 12, 13, 14, pellets. And then you find, the dead soldier with his rifle. Well, what has been going on? Well, they haven't been firing. They've been taking their smoothbore muskets and they've been filling them with ammunition, going through the motions, pretending to fire, and each time they don't fire. So it's not easy to get soldiers to kill, and especially when you close the distance and you move into a ground game. That becomes a completely different story. Of course, people who are fighting to defend themselves will defend themselves and their family and their land and their territory. But if the U.S. thinks that it can go yet into another expeditionary war in a country that is 3 times the size of Iraq, that has centuries, if not millennia, of resisting and fighting foreign invaders, I think they're in for, a completely different I think they're in for something completely different.
From your mouth to God's ears, it is my fervent wish that Iran destroys its enemies as an absolute. The notion that we have been engaged in these hateful, bloodthirsty bloodlettings. I mean, in Syria, they were selling black slaves, for God's sake. And just look at what they were doing in Gaza. And by the way, we all watched it. Like, it wasn't even like they did this behind the scenes. They're doing this at this point with impunity. In the old days, they weren't, and we could end it on this. In the old days, when they found out that Ronald Reagan had kill squads in South America, people were shocked by it. Oh my God, America doesn't supposed to do this. We're supposed to believe in freedom and love and light and Coca-Cola and, Santa Claus and whatever the hell else. It is outrageous that we are getting money from Iranians, supposedly our enemies, in order to pay kill squads, in order to kill Sandinistas in South America. And Reagan, I remember distinctly, this was my first, maybe main political moment of awareness, of memory, where you had the Iran-Contra affair. Reagan comes on TV, they have the old picture that they used to have and all that stuff. And Reagan gives this astonishing speech where he points out, I didn't know anything about it. I was blissfully unaware, but I'm the Gipper. And so the buck stops with me. You guys have a phenomenal day. There were no consequences for Ronald Reagan on this. There were no retribution. The only person, Colonel North, Colonel North, I think, was the one who effectively took the lightning rod of all the attention. And you fast forward to maybe 40 years later, where everybody knows that Obama is engaged in a regime change war in Syria, and nobody gives a shit. And they know that he's trying everything in his power to knock over their government. Everybody knows that Bush lied in Iraq, killing 1 million Iraqis. Nobody gives a shit. Everybody knows that, we were directly related to the creation of ISIS. Nobody gives a shit. Meaning, we have come to the assessment that they're disposable people. And in the process of those disposable people, if those people die, get killed, wiped away in any particular fashion, not a big deal. It's not us. Who cares? And now we have moved on in the Middle East now to Syria, where they're murdering Alawites, Christians, something that we said exactly was going to happen the moment that Assad was overthrown. And now they're trying to do the same thing to Iran. And so my audience will say I've become a hard ass. That's why. That shit needs to stop. And when you realize that your country is a purveyor of evil and the way that it is operating almost systematically, going from one place to the next and creating this chaos around the globe, it needs to be stopped. There needs to be something that stops this. This is empire. It's not to our best interest. So I want to be very clear. It's not that I want the Chinese to get involved into a fight. It's not that I want any of these people to get into a fight. I would wager Iran didn't want to get into a fight. They did everything in their power to avoid it. I would imagine the Russians didn't want to get into a fight. They did everything in their power to avoid it. But bullies only understand getting a broken nose. And unfortunately, hopefully that broken nose can stay with Iran having that fight where it doesn't expand. But I don't know. And I think this world, I think you're right, that they're going to run into a buzzsaw. I don't think Iran is going to just capitulate in a way that they think they may. But I think we are in for some dark times, especially in the next few weeks.
I mean, I'm sorry to keep, harping on Professor Morandi. But you before, he's a man of letters. He's a, deeply humane individual. He's a professor of literature, and yet he went to war. And I think that that's something that people here don't understand, that everybody in Iran will take up arms and resist if their country is invaded or attacked in this brutal, vicious, and let's emphasize, illegal fashion. It's completely illegal. Everything that is happening right now, it's a violation of international law. If there's any concept of international law, all of this is a complete and total violation, threatening, invading a sovereign country with aggressive war, knocking out their government, threatening their leader, threatening their people on no grounds. I mean, all of this is illegal from top to bottom. And it's clear that, I think that the Iranians will fight. I've heard, from my own Iranian colleagues. Some of them are extreme left. They don't like, the religious government, but they have said to me that if this happens, I will pick up arms and I will fly back to Iran and I will pick up arms and I will fight for my country. That's something that I think that the U.S. doesn't understand and doesn't calculate, because it doesn't understand. The U.S. has never been invaded, on its own territory, so it doesn't understand the desire of people to resist. This is why it keeps losing wars. Every war where it has invaded another country, and I don't count Grenada and Panama as wars. They were essentially police actions. But every time it goes to war, it miscalculates the desire of people to resist and maintain the integrity of their country. So I think the thing that's important for people who are upset about this war, and certainly many of us are, certainly I am, is that the solution is not to say, let's you and him fight. The solution is not to say somebody else should do something. The question to ask is really what we can do, because at the end of the day, the call is coming from within the house. We are the purveyors, as Martin Luther King put it, the greatest of violence. So then the question becomes, what can we do? How can we, put some friction into the machine? And I don't have have a list of things to do, but I think that it's not too hard to figure out where the agents of this violence are. You just look at the media, you see who these people are and what they're saying. The tech companies that are facilitating this. All of this it's an interconnected system. But what it also means is there are many places in which you can at least put some friction, put some sand into the gears of this war machine. And then, of course, the most important thing is not to get trapped by the propaganda, because that is such a constant thing that we are being subject to. People fall into it without thinking. They fall into it just as a matter of habit because they've been exposed to it so often. So you also have to resist the indoctrination. And it's almost kind of like you have to degauss your mind every so often, because there's so much, interference. So you have to kind of degauss yourself and then think clearly and then decide, what is it that I and my communities can do it for the cause of peace? How do we slow down this war machine? How do we prevent us from escalating into a world war? Just one last comment. You mentioned Santa Claus, okay? And Santa is really, really important because he is one of the kind of archetypes of indoctrination. At a very young age, many young people are indoctrinated into the myth of Santa Claus. And although they forget about Santa Claus, the lessons that Santa Claus has imparted into you remain. So what are the lessons? Okay, the lessons of Santa Claus are the myth of satisfied labors. Little elves build toys in Santa's workshop and they're delighted to be exploited, right? Okay, you have
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I suppose, yeah.
You have the myth of spontaneous generation of wealth. Essentially, you go to sleep and, miraculously, wealth appears. This is what the capitalists refer to as the miracle of compound interest or the miracle of good investing, right? Just wealth appears spontaneously. That's a myth. You also have, this notion of this myth of commodities, that they have no past or history or social relations, when actually they're congealed labor, or more often they're congealed packaged labor of a package of human suffering. And then, there's this myth of abundance and benevolence, that we live in this abundant and benevolent world where good children wake up rich with gifts delivered, from a benevolent, mystical figure. Well, that's absolutely the opposite. Millions of people every single night, most of them children, they go to bed hungry without the barest necessity. And when Christmas comes around, it means they get a boot in the face and they have punishingly intensive work in sweatshops. There's this myth of justice that, if you're good, you get good things, right? This is, everybody gets what they want. And if they don't, they've been bad, right?
Yes.
And then, it's, this notion that, anyway, I could go on, but, this is the myth of the market. This is frictionless distribution, barrierless entry, no externalities, perfect knowledge of what is needed, perfect equilibrium and satisfaction. All of these myths are packaged very neatly in the
Santa Claus.
In Santa. And
So
you
right.
learn this from a very, very young age. And then you grow up and you discard the Santa piece, but you believe all the other indoctrination. And so this is the kind of way in which we've been so completely indoctrinated.
Oh,
And
that's
so
so good.
get rid of.
Oh, so good, KJ. That's so good. Yeah, just because you're good doesn't mean good things happen to you. KJ, you are always fantastic. Thank you for this. And you're right, by the way. Last question, and this could be quick. It feels, and I don't know if this is true, it feels this way, that there's more friction in this war than it was with Iraq. Meaning there seems to be more people who are more open to say, this is fucking outrageous. Why are we doing this? And even the American public seems to be like, this is fucking outrageous. Why are we doing this? I mean, it's like 70% that think this is insane.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the MAGA, there's sectors of the MAGA, right, that are absolutely incensed. Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, they are coming out against this war. They're denouncing, criticizing Trump for this. So, this is not trivial. So, if the right, can make a stand and can speak out against the war, certainly the left can as well. And I think that's what needs to happen. People need to speak out against this war and other wars, and of course against, the genocide in Palestine. But the thing that we have to do away with, and again, this is the indoctrination of Santa. The Santa myth is that if we close our eyes and go to sleep, then we get what we want or deserve, right? That is the ultimate indoctrination. All you have to do is just be ignorant. The ignorance will get you what you want. Going to sleep will get you what you want. It won't. Okay. So that's the fundamental myth that we have to do away with, that we actually have to wake up. We have to open our eyes, see what's going on, and start to take action.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. You're fan-fucking-tastic, KJ. Thank you for this, man. KJ, no. Like I said, you're easy little fan favorite. KJ, do you know we have 5,000 people here today? I shit you not. I've never had this many people. And they start tacking up when you got here. The audience loves you, man. KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He's contributed to the book, Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is available at iacenter.org. You can find KJ at the ChinaReport on Breakthrough News Network. KJ, when is your next show coming out? I always ask you this because I want the audience to know where they can find you.
It comes out on Tuesdays, and I'm on every other Tuesday.
Every other Tuesday. Okay. Oh, okay. You're on every other Tuesday. Okay. Fair enough. You have a fantastic day. It is early in the morning for you. So enjoy your day, man. Thank you for this. Really, I deeply appreciate your commentary today. Thank you for this. All right, guys, we have come to the end of another show. KJ is just fantastic. I deeply appreciate him joining me. I really do. And I appreciate his take. The reason why I asked them about the China thing is there are a lot of people screaming on social media. They are screaming. And you even see with the Russians, why isn't Putin doing more? Why isn't Russia doing more? Why isn't this and why isn't that? And I understand it. I get it. If you're looking at it from an empire point of view, it looks like they're knocking people off the game board in order for this kind of world domination thing. By the same token, something that Lath pointed out when he was on the show, Lath was ebullient in that show, if you've noticed. When Syria fell, those were two different Laths, right? And it wasn't that he was ebullient because Iran was being attacked. I think he looked at it as they fucked up. I think that's the way he looked at it. It's a wager on a board of Earth. And that wager is we believe that we have the capability of committing a genocide in front of the broad daylight, that the Europeans and Americans will back us, they will, because they're sociopaths, and that we can effectively kowtow, meaning we can marginalize the quisling Arab governments, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, etc. You could. They will stand there and watch you murder Arab children. They would do it in a heartbeat. They have no issue doing that, at the very least, the leadership. And with them marginalized, despite the fact that they will be next, that we can now go after Iran, after taking down Syria, Lebanon, etc. And they believe that fighting or burning kids alive is the same thing as a proper war. As a flat fact, I don't care what any of my guests say, having a child throw a rock at you is not the same thing as fighting a military. I don't give a shit what my guests say. As a flat fact, fighting a militia is not the same thing as fighting a proper military. And the moment that you throw that sucker punch and you give them the moral high ground, for one, meaning in all the world opinion showed up to 14% of white folks in Europe, that you've effectively given A, the moral high ground, and B, license to unleash. And so I would imagine, the glee that people are feeling with their cities being bombed, with their people being killed, with their infrastructure being decimated, with them living in bomb shelters, with them not having gas, meaning the glee that people are feeling is not because those people are horrible people, it's because they're good people. And that what they're feeling is a certain amount of justice at what they've considered to be injustice that have been taking place over the last 2 years without any consequence, none. An Israeli having PTSD is not a consequence. That's not a consequence. I'm sorry. I don't give a shit. So your destruction to look like Gaza is a consequence, because that is the only thing that they give a shit about. The other stuff they don't seem to care about. They don't care about international law. They don't care about murder, death, killing, rape. They don't care about any of that stuff. They don't care about being honest. They don't care about ethics. None of those things matter. And so a group of sociopaths have now, blood in their mouth, gone to the next place to feed on the blood of other innocent women and children. And just so happened that these innocent women and children knew how to throw a punch. And they're like, oh my God, we're getting punched in the face. We're getting kicked in the balls. And we didn't realize getting kicked in the balls hurts this much. Oh, America, please come and save us. Now, that may not have been a series of events. They may, and I'm of mine to believe that possibly sacrifice their own people in order to drag America into the war, knowing full well that they were going to lose. Whichever order of events, I don't know. But as I kept pointing out, and I was right, that the US ran into a buzzsaw in Ukraine because racist people and hateful people don't see the world clearly. And when they finally came in contact with that real world, it's like, oh my God, the stove is hot. We got our ass kicked. Okay. Now you're dealing with a 1 million man Russian military that has been killing and dying for 3 years. And they are chewing through your team like tissue paper because they finally come to the correct assessment that negotiations were pointless endeavor and didn't matter one iota, because they were never going to give you a fair deal, nor were they going to talk to you or about you in honest terms. It was always about empire freezing the conflict until they got back around to you where you were in a weaker state, i.e. Syria. Russia's aware, and they're responding accordingly. Iran apparently didn't get the memo. And so it took them to be attacked for them to realize these people are fucking liars. And not just fucking liars. It is astonishing that in the notion of statecraft, that they are willing to display their dishonesty on the world stage, not even in the shadows, right? Just, we're dishonest liars. Which means that it is pointless for anybody to negotiate with you. It's pointless for anybody to talk to you. It's pointless for anybody to even sit down with you because you're flagrant liars, not to mention genocidal sociopaths. Okay, that's a weird place to be as a country that calls itself a world leader. And you're now dealing with countries that you actually do need to negotiate with. And none of them trust you in the least. Do you think that's going to make any negotiator harder or better? Now, if you're able to topple Iran, doesn't matter, right? But if you are not, and that test of strength fails, just like it did in Ukraine, and there will be forces that are coming to Ukraine to Iran's aid, they're not in this alone, even if they don't put in military power. Military power might not even be needed. Yes, it's a sacrifice. Yes, it's a brutal sacrifice. But that doesn't mean that they lose. You win a contest by denying your enemy the thing that they want to accomplish. And in this case, just like in Yemen, where they wanted to take down the Yemenis and couldn't do it, or in Ukraine, they wanted to take down the Russians and couldn't do it, or in this case, they wanted to take down the Iranians and couldn't. Can they do it? Especially considering Iran has the support of A, nuclear powers, B, countries with massive industrial bases, with heavy and sophisticated military technology. Can they do it? That's an interesting question, right? That is what the US has put on the table. I suppose we're going to find out the answer. We are at the brink of disaster. We are whistling past the graveyard in real terms. But again, this is not something that they asked for. It's not what they asked for. I'm going to be on Canadian Preppers tonight. What time is it? Okay, I need to go through this quick. He invited me back on. I'm shocked. But I'm going to be on the show today in an hour or so. So I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. Yes, I'm dragging ass, but it's okay. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. And let's see, Pink Rose. Israel is finding out Colonel Wilkerson is the best. Colonel Wilkerson is fantastic. He is a fantastic guest. Dennis, Chief, came on. I'm going to have to get him back on. I fucked up. I could have swore I sent both of them the message to see whether or not they're willing to come on to discuss it militarily, because I like the dynamic between both of them. They have a really good chemistry together. I saw Colonel Wilkerson's. I could have swore Chiefs said that he couldn't do it on this day because something else was going on. He said he had to leave early. And I was like, God damn it. I just misread it. I will see to get him back on individually, and then I will try to get both of them back on together. I'll do it that way. Both of them are fantastic guests. They work extraordinarily great together. I love each of them, either singularly or together. So there was no slight or intention. They actually have pretty good analysis, as opposed to some people who thought it was going to be an undeclared nuclear, unprovoked nuclear war on Iran on day one. I'm not pointing out any names. Colonial capitalism must end. For peace to be, for a moment, that I thought that was in a different language. For peace to be, colonial capitalism must end. Yeah, I mean, if you can't deal with even exchange, like, what is it? Thomas Piketty was his name. He's making that, well, I don't know if he would make the argument that colonial capitalism, I think he would make the argument that the fact that, or the way that the West extracted resources out of its colonies effectively prevented those colonies from having some level of equal exchange. And that if it was done in a kind of fair means, that the colonies would have been the lenders and the colonizers would have been the debtor nations. So even under the capitalistic model where you didn't have colonies, Europe still would have been fucked. Pink Rose, is Santa a Zionist too? I love KJ, he's awesome. That is a hell of a breakdown. I got to be honest, I've never thought of Santa in that way. I would never see Santa Claus the same again. He's ruined my childhood. Arthur Fletcher, super sticker. Thank you, Arthur Fletcher. Thank you for that. Tarakara, my brother, some of your guests are delusional. Iran is winning the war, is obvious. He is for Israel. Your guest is not a balanced person. What does it matter? Honestly, what does it matter? He has a different point of view. He's more cynical in his take. And whether it's coming out of Maloof, whether it's coming out of Daniel Lazare, I don't need an echo chamber. I could be wrong. You must understand, I don't come from this with this notion of God's correctness, like some analysts who usually gets it wrong. I come from this, from the take that I am a person that is perched at the edge of the world, looking at events, and I make certain evaluations based on my own experiences, based on my own reading, based on my own analysis of what I think is most likely to be true. But I could get it wrong. And it is good to have people who you can push up against to see whether or not your take on this will hold sway. The reason I brought up Ukraine to him, because he was wrong on Ukraine. I was right on Ukraine. And I was trying to point out that this overt cynicism at the capabilities of certain nations, I follow this stuff constantly. It is what I do for a living. So if I am taking a take on it, I'm not taking a take just because I'm thinking shit up. I'm taking a take based on what I'm seeing on the ground. I don't know if that's true for Daniel. He is well-versed in this stuff. Do not sell him short. The man is brilliant. And he could talk about the entire globe off the top of his head on a whim. So it's not that he's for anybody per se. He's just giving his take. You may not like his take, but it's his take. It's an honest take. There's no bias coming out of him in this. He's a fantastic guest. He's an awesome guest. He's brilliant. So, I'm not saying that just because he's my guest. He's a brilliant guy. Daniel, you could bring up any random thing, and Daniel could sit here and talk to you about it, chapter and verse. He's that good. I've done it before. Just random stuff around the globe, he would rattle off like he wrote the book on it. So I do get your take that we're in a war. We're fired up in some respects. There's a sense of justice that we want to be meted out. But look, there's no God that makes justice inevitable at all. Daniel could be right. Iran could lose. Empire could win. That's true. It's a flat fact. It's true. It could happen. So, be less certain. Opposition is not, by definition, bad. Having somebody to give an opposition point of view is not a negative thing, by definition. There's some people who are just trolls. Fair enough. Daniel is not a troll. He is a legitimate scholar who knows his stuff. Even if I disagree with him, I don't doubt under any situation that he doesn't know his stuff. And so when I say I appreciate him for being willing to kind of have a back and forth with me, I mean it in real terms. I do appreciate it. It's not an echo chamber. That's not my objective, to create one. I know some people take issue with some of my guests, but I don't bring my guests on because they agree with me per se. I bring my guests on because I want their take. I want their analysis. I want their point of view. Their point of view can often inform my own. And, you shift on some level based upon what's happening on the ground versus what you think is most likely to be true and the best argument that is being put forth. I think my argument is better than his on this. We unfortunately will see. Unfortunately. Taraka, thank you though. I do appreciate this. Like as I keep telling you, the show is going to be demonetized, so I do appreciate you. SE, guys, delusional. I watched live stream in Tel Aviv being turned into Gaza, and surreal. What? Shit real is past AI traffic and claim victory. Agreed. But the same thing holds true to my original comment that I just made. Difference in point of view. And yes, that was, the traffic wasn't like that. That was AI generated. Wanda, USA doesn't want killing anymore. MAGA. And yes, they do. Yes, they do. Those cultists are perfectly okay with Donald Trump killing and murdering as many people as he wants to accomplish his objective. You can look at Gaza. Israel preventing 2 million from leaving human shields. Yes. That's some shit, ain't it? That is some shit, ain't it? And from my understanding, they didn't even want Americans to leave. They said Huckabee got into a shouting match with Netanyahu over Americans leaving. And he was like, dude, you're out of your fucking mind. We're getting our people out. Netanyahu didn't want them to leave. I'm shocked they got into a shouting match. I thought they would sacrifice those Americans every bit as much as we're willing to sacrifice those Israelis. I think what he knows is Israel dies if they let those people leave, which I suspect is the point of Iran having that creeping attack, that creeping strategy of day after day of psychological warfare where you don't even know when the missiles are coming, where they say, we're going to bomb in 15 minutes, nothing comes. And then 30 minutes, bam, we're going to bomb later. Nothing comes. Your air sirens, you go into air thing, nothing happens. You come out a few hours later, here they are. You can imagine that wreaks havoc on the nerves when you can't create a normal, let's say, pattern of reality. Now, people could say, oh my God, Iran's running out of missiles. I think those people are out their fucking mind. I think what's happening is Iran is fucking with them psychologically in the same way that Israelis have fucked with Gazans for the last several years, or for the next matter, for the last several decades, where you had no idea when a bomb was coming. You had no idea when you were going to die. You had no idea when somebody in your family was going to get killed. You had no idea when somebody in your family was going to get thrown into a jail cell. And in this last few years, your predictability of reality was gone up in smoke. Okay, welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. Wandi, you mentioned the president can be removed. I went through that one. Jabari, VOC Media, Rome will fall, and unfortunately, we live in Rome. There's that part, Jabari. There's that part. But just because a regime falls doesn't mean that the country goes anywhere. I just want the sociopaths to go. I just want that. I don't want people to die. I don't want people to get hurt, to get sick. I don't want any of that stuff. I want the resources of America to be used for America and not to be used for empire. That's what I want. It's very basic, very straightforward. But unfortunately, yeah, Rome is falling and we live in Rome. Let's see, would love to see a show with Ben Norden. I've tried to get Ben Norden. Ben Norden doesn't want to come on my show. So that solves that. Pink Rose, Israel is finding out Colonel Wilkerson is the best. Yes, Colonel Wilkerson is fantastic. Look, guys, I've tried to get many people. You'd be surprised. A lot of people don't want to come on the show. And I gotta be honest, I don't really give a shit. But my job is to build and keep moving. That is my task. If people come on, God bless them. If they don't, oh well. I can only keep plugging along, keep trying. I've hit Ben up, I've hit Rachel, I've hit a few people up. They just weren't interested. There's no negative in that. People go on the shows that they want. There are plenty of shows I just say no to for various reasons. Some could be just, I don't want to give up that early in the morning, which is ironic considering I have a morning show. so there's that, right? Yeah, there's no wrong. Ben is a really good commentator. He does good work. No issue with him at all. Rachel Blevins is fantastic at what she does. I go down the list of people who are fantastic at what they do, who don't come on the show. It's okay. It happens. All right, I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to be on Canadian Preppers. I don't know if he's going to run that live, but yeah, I'm dragging ass. I'm going to get some coffee before I go in. What is this? Zio, what is that? Patrol super sticker. Thank you, Zio. Where's it, Zia or Zio? Zia. Thank you, Zia. Deeply appreciate it. Deeply appreciate it. You guys have a fantastic day. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Who do I have tomorrow morning? What is tomorrow morning? Thursday? Dan Kabalik, Sarah Bills. I am going to have to add other people on to Thursday. I do not know if I'm going to do Friday. We'll see how that unfolds. I may take Friday as a rest day. But you guys have a phenomenal day. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Yeah, I need to get off here. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Be safe. Have a good one all.